Mayor, we are ready to start when you are.
Okay, well, welcome to the City of Bellevue City Council meeting for November 8th, 2021. City Clerk, could you call the roll, please?
Yes, Mayor Robinson.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Neuenhuis.
Here.
Councilmember Barksdale.
Here.
Councilmember Lee.
Here.
Councilmember Robertson.
I'm here.
Councilmember Stokes.
Here.
And Councilmember Zahn.
Here.
Councilmember Barksdale, could you please lead us in the flag salute?
Councilor Mayor, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We have three proclamations to read tonight. The first one is the World War II Chinese American Veterans Day Proclamation. Councilmember Lee, could you read that for us, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Whereas, despite being subjected to the U.S.-Chinese Exclusionary Act from 1882 to 1943, along with other discriminatory laws which restricted their rights and treated them as second-class citizens, nearly 20,000 Chinese Americans valiantly served in the United States military during World War II. And whereas these American heroes defended our nation's democracy in every theater of war and in every branch of service, even as they faced prejudice at home and in the military. And whereas Chinese American World War II veterans never lost sight of the potential and promise of a nation where all people are created equal. And whereas on December 18th, 2018, the United States Congress passed the Congressional Gold Medal Act to award the highest civilian honor, a Congressional Gold Medal, to the Chinese American World War II veterans. And whereas on December 9th, 2020, the Speaker of the House bestowed Congressional Gold Medal collectively to Chinese American World War II veterans. And whereas many of these courageous and dedicated Chinese American World War II veterans lived in and returned to the great state of Washington and are a source of inspiration for current and future generations of all Washingtonians. Now, therefore, Lynn Robertson, Mayor of the City of Bellevue, Washington, on behalf of the City Council, do hereby proclaim November 13, 2021 as Chinese American World War II Veterans Day in Bellevue, Washington, recognizing the contribution of these veterans and calling on our community to join in this reflection and honoring of these important members of our community. Signed by Lynn Robertson, Mayor, City of Bellevue.
Thank you, Councilmember Lee. The next one is a Veterans Day proclamation. Councilmember Robertson, could you please read that?
Certainly. Whereas November 11th is Veterans Day, a time to pay tribute to the men and women who have served or currently serve our country. And whereas we acknowledge the contributions and sacrifices made by our military and veterans. And whereas the contributions of the men and women in the Navy, Army, Air Force, Marines, and Coast Guard in support of our national security is immeasurable. And whereas the freedom we enjoy in this country and in our local communities is owed in great part to the valor of our veterans in conflicts around the world. And whereas behind every man and woman in uniform, there are families, caregivers, and loved ones who compensate and sacrifice for the person serving. And whereas Veterans Day takes place on the anniversary of the end of World War I. Now, therefore, on behalf of Lynn Robinson, Mayor of the City of Bellevue, Washington, and on behalf of its City Council, do hereby proclaim November 11th as Veterans Day in Bellevue and urge all residents to reflect on the contributions and sacrifices of men and women who have served in the U.S. Armed Forces. Signed, Lynn Robinson, Mayor, City of Bellevue.
Thank you, Councilmember Robertson. Then the last one I will read is for Transgender Awareness Week. So whereas more than 1 million US adults identify as transgender, according to a 2016 study from the UCLA's Williams Institute, and each year people and organizations around the country participate in Transgender Awareness Week, November 13th through 19th, to help raise visibility and awareness of transgender communities and address the issues they face. And first officially recognized in 1999, Transgender Day of Remembrance on November 20th is an annual vigil that takes place around the world to honor and remember all transgender community members lost to violence in the current year. And at least 44 transgender people in the United States were killed by violence so far this year, according to the Human Rights Campaign, a group that has tracked fatal violence against transgender individuals since 2013. And during Transgender Awareness Week, recognized during the week leading up to Transgender Day of Remembrance, transgender people and their allies educate the public about who transgender people are, the prejudice, discrimination, and violence they often face, and the urgent need for resources to support and protect this community. Now, therefore, I, Lynn Robinson, Mayor of Bellevue, Washington, on behalf of the entire City Council, do hereby proclaim November 13th through 19th, 2021 as Transgender Awareness Week in Bellevue, recognizing the contributions that transgender people make to our community and standing with them against discrimination and violence. Signed by me. Thank you, everybody. Okay, is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I move to approve the agenda.
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, City Clerk, do we have anybody signed up for oral communications?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Robinson. This evening, there are 2 pre-registered speakers for oral communications. And with that, I will call the first speaker, who is Court Olson. Mr. Olson, can you hear me?
I sure can. Thank you.
Thank you. Your time begins now.
Good evening, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Newenhouse, Council Members Zahn, Robertson, Barksdale, Stokes, and Lee, and City Manager Miyake. Nice to be with you again. I'd like to make a few brief comments on the proposed mid-buy budget changes this evening on behalf of People for Climate Action Bellevue chapter. We're glad to see, first of all, over $2 million added to the housing fund line. That's a good move. And it's also good to see the several proposed actions the city has to cut internal greenhouse gas emissions in tonight's agenda. That said, I searched all through the budget information and did not find any specific mention of additional funds for the environmental stewardship program. And we hope that there's extra money buried somewhere there that isn't yet identified. And if not, we request that you make sure that it does get added. In the summer and fall, we recall hearing nearly all of you voice the desire to advance the environmental stewardship plan at a more rapid pace. And it's clear that that's needed to meet the Council's commitment to reduce greenhouse gas emissions community-wide 50% by 2030. And to do that, it's quite apparent that additional staff are needed. So we proposed adding $400,000 to next year, 2022's budget to hire 3 more environmental stewardship staff members. And we recommend that the more staff would be needed to do the following. First of all, educate the general public and city staff on the causes and solutions relating to greenhouse gas emissions so that everyone understands why the actions in the environmental stewardship plan are needed. Secondly, these new staff members would be responsible for developing robust actions to cut emissions in the existing building sector, which represents half of our community's greenhouse gas emissions inventory. And last, we think that additional staff would be very helpful to plan and write specific resolutions, policies, and ordinances to be implemented next year. And finally, we recommend that you do this because for the last decade, Bellevue's only had 2 environmental stewardship staff members, and they've been working hard, but we've added this environmental stewardship plan, and that means more folks are needed. And we've seen in our study of other cities across the country that are making rapid progress in reducing greenhouse gas emissions that they have substantially more staff and greater budget allocations than Bellevue does. So please look into that budget allocation and make the adjustments if necessary. Thank you very much for your time tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Olson. The next speaker on the list is Barbara Chevalier. Ms. Chevalier, can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you. Your time begins now.
Great, thank you. So thank you, council members, for the opportunity to speak with you this evening. So as you probably may know, I'm a Bellevue resident and the co-founder of 300 Trees, a nonprofit project that has been working closely with the Environmental Stewardship Initiative to expand Bellevue's tree canopy. We have given away over 500 trees on our own in our giveaways around Bellevue. We recently helped the city give away around 700 trees in October, and we are gearing up to plant more than 300 trees this weekend at Sammamish High. Now, recently, the council, both collectively and individual members, has really been responsive to constituent desires and outspoken about the need to protect our existing trees and plant more. And that's why I was actually surprised to not see any additional funding for land use code amendments related to tree protection in the proposed budget. Bellevue currently has one of the least protective tree-related codes in this region, and that actually presents a real opportunity for us to follow the lead of model cities, even nearby, like Burien, to give us one of the best and strongest. Given all the apparent support for protecting trees, I'm asking the council to set aside at least $200,000 to update the code. Now, the city has a goal of 40% equitably distributed tree canopy. We're currently around 36%, but now is the time to act before we find ourselves like Seattle with a tree canopy at 28% and a much more difficult, if not impossible, journey to that goal of 40%. This relatively small investment now will pay dividends for Bellevue and its residents for decades to come in natural beauty, cooler urban temperatures, and cleaner air and water. I therefore respectfully request that the council follow both its constituents' wishes and its own statements to deliver for all of us on the promise of a greener, cleaner, and more vibrant Bellevue. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Chevalier. That reaches the end of our pre-registered list for oral communications. If there's anyone else connected to this meeting who would like to make comment to the council, please use the raise hand function or *9 if you're connected with a phone. And Mayor, I do not see any additional hands. That would close oral communications.
Okay, next up is the report of our city manager, Mr. Miyake.
Thank you, Mayor Robinson and council members. I have two items under the report of the city manager this evening. And the first item is a report on the city's preparation measures for the winter weather predictions. Joining us this evening is Chris Long, our new Assistant Director for Mobility Operations in our Transportation Department, who will explain some of the new tools we have for 2022 and what our interdepartmental response team has done to prepare for this season. This is an informational update, and with that, I'll turn it over to Chris Long. Chris?
Thank you, City Manager Miyake, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Neuenhouse, and Council for having me back to talk about our preparations for this winter. So in my presentation today, I'll cover what we've done to prepare, a little bit on our training, and what's new for this winter in our operations. So first, the outlook for this winter. Just like last year, this year looks to be another La Nina year, which means we'll see potentially a slightly cooler winter with above average precipitation. So although we consider the seasonal forecast, this information is really just for awareness, and we prepare for each winter the same. And we use our 14-day forecast to do all of our near-term preparations when we're looking to deal with a storm. But in preparing for a winter, we start in the summer, and that starts with making sure all our plow blades are serviced and all of our equipment is ready to go. And then in the fall, we get all our new materials ordered and in place. So we have all of our anti-icing and hard material that we put on the road during a snow event. We've completed all our training, and I can say that as of November 1st, we are winter weather ready. So, sorry about that. Starting with the training aspect, we This year, we were able to do a little bit more of a hybrid training. Last year went all virtual with the staff for the first time, and that was done through modules that were put into our training program to go through all the typical hands-on training that the staff would do. And this year, we were able to do small groups of our newer staff, anyone who'd been with the city less than 5 years, to go through some of the more technical tasks that they would need to do during a storm, such as putting chains on a truck and making adjustments to your plow blade. In total, we train about 150 staff across the 4 departments listed here. And during an event, we run 2 shifts, a day shift and a night shift, and each of those shifts requires about 29 people. So that's about 60 people every day that are out supporting one of these storms. So the chance to get some people in person again was great for that training. So a quick recap of last year's storm. We had 2 events that we had to work. The first was an ice event in early January, but then the big storm came in February, where we had 6 straight days of snow. The photo on the right is the unofficial measurement of accumulation on my front deck in Eastgate, and I had about 12 inches of snow here. So that was quite a storm, and it required the full force of our 4 departments to tackle this storm. We had all 15 plows on the road for close to 6 days straight, and Parks has their 3 plows that are working on the hospitals, fire stations, and other civic buildings. And when they are done with those facilities, they were able to get out on the roads and help our staff as well. So it was a great team effort to tackle last year's storm. So looking at what we have new for this year, first I'm going to remind you of a project we kicked off last year, and that was the Automated Vehicle Locating System project. And that was where we put GPS equipment in 24 of our winter response vehicles to better monitor their location on plow routes and have a quicker response to emergencies on the road when needed, such as helping to get an ambulance to a neighborhood. So this year we're tackling 2 more phases of that project. And the first is to do a year of testing of a real-time snowplow map that'll show what roads, when each road that's been plowed was last plowed, so that eventually we can put this out to the public so that they can see if the arterial street near their home had been plowed. So this year that'll be done with an internal map that we're testing, and we hope to roll that out to the public for our next winter season. The other is we have put chip reader devices in all of our vehicles that allow our staff to badge into the vehicle so that when we bring in a new crew of 15 people, they don't all have to each radio in and as they're being dispatched out of the yard here. And instead, it can all be automated and it's connected to the AVL system so that when they click on one of the maps, they know exactly which operator is driving that vehicle. The last item I want to talk about is a partnership we have with the University of Washington STAR Lab with focusing our attention on Lakemont Boulevard. So Lakemont is one of the most challenging corridors in the city to manage. It carries over 17,000 vehicles a day during normal conditions. It climbs from 200 feet above sea level to 900 feet above sea level. Has high speeds, heavily vegetated with tall trees on the side. And so this is a combination of things that leads to a lot of problems during a major winter storm event, as you can see in these photos. So we started working on this, focusing our attention on this corridor with new technology last year. And the photo in the lower left shows a screen capture of our video management system showing what we call our snow cams. And so we've deployed additional cameras on this corridor so we can see almost every inch of asphalt on that corridor during a winter event. And then with the UW, they've deployed 3 new devices along the corridor that they are testing out as part of an innovation grant that they got from the USDOT to be able to monitor roadway conditions, looking at an estimation of roadway temperature and then the condition of the roadway, whether it's icy or you've got compact snow on it. And then it can also monitor any change in condition of the vehicle traffic on the road. So if it sees a car pointing the wrong direction or that spins out or a tree on the road, This system will report those incidents via an app to our dispatchers in our dispatch center during an event. So this is an exciting new pilot that we're testing out with the UW, and we've had great partnerships with them over the years in other technology, and look forward to seeing if this is a tool that can help us in other parts of the city as well. And with that, that's what I have for this year, and we are looking forward to another safe winter in the city. Thanks.
Thank you for that presentation, and we all wish you lots of luck in this coming season. If anybody has questions, I'd like you to follow up with staff, if you could please, after the meeting. Let's go on to the next one, Mr. Miyake.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. The second item under the city manager's report is an overview of the 2021 Biennial Bellevue Business Survey results. And just by way of background, the city conducts a survey of Bellevue businesses every 2 years to understand key metrics and attitudes about starting, operating, and owning a business in Bellevue. Tonight, you'll hear a brief report on findings from the 4th Biennial Business Survey conducted this year. This is informational only, and as you mentioned, Mayor, we're happy to take questions offline after the meeting if any of the council members has questions. Joining us this evening is Philly Marsh, our Economic Development Manager, and joining her is Corbin Hart, Economic Development Analyst. With that, Philly, I'll turn it over to you to begin the presentation.
Great. Thank you, City Manager. Thank you, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and members of Council. We're excited to bring you a brief report on the results of the 2021 Business Survey. Corbin, go ahead and advance to the next slide, please. The Business Survey is conducted every 2 years, and tonight's report represents the 4th set of data from our business community. Responses represent the Bellevue business community across all industries, sizes, and locations, and we're able to examine the findings based on industry size and location level. The findings of this survey help staff better understand the needs of our local businesses and enable the city to continue to deliver high quality services to the business community. This is especially important in the ever increasing competitive environment with work from home models and other impacts of COVID. We use the quantitative data that we receive from this survey and pair it with the qualitative information that we hear directly from our business outreach as a tool to guide our current and future programming. Even with COVID, our top line results remain stable and positive. 2021 findings reflect an overall strong economic position and optimistic business community in recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. And then many of the challenges identified already have efforts in progress to address those challenges, both through our cultural and economic development plan, as well as other city efforts. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Corbin Hart, our economic development analyst, to speak to some of the specific findings of the survey.
Thanks, Philly. So as you all can see here, here you see a display, a table displaying the results for the survey's top line metrics. Overall, the business survey's findings reflect an overall strong economic position, as Philly said, despite COVID's economic impacts. However, the survey did find specific barriers and challenges related to COVID recovery, growth, and affordability. As you can see, this year's key metrics saw increases, with the likelihood of a business recommending doing business in Bellevue jumping 9 points. Our other key metrics saw modest increases as well. And the one metric to decline slightly from 2019 was quality of services provided to businesses. However, results were still in line with 2017 and 2015 results, which you can see on the table there. And those findings could also simply be a reflection of COVID impacts on city service delivery. So diving deeper into some of these findings, businesses continue to rate the state of their business as being strong. These findings hold especially true for Bellevue's larger employers. However, small businesses rate their economic strength lower than large businesses on average. When you break this question down by industry, businesses in the tourism and creative industry sectors make up the vast majority of businesses reporting their economic strength as weak. So while businesses overall in Bellevue are doing well, small businesses in sectors specifically impacted by COVID continue to struggle. Overall, businesses plan to keep investing in Bellevue, with 46% of businesses planning on increasing their capital expenditures, an increase of 7% from 2019. Businesses increasing their employment count remains steady from 2019 at 36%. And this is actually the first year we asked if businesses anticipate increasing the amount of space they lease or own. There were some interesting findings among these questions, mainly among the 20% difference between businesses increasing their headcount versus those increasing the amount of space occupied. This really speaks to increased work from home adoption and hybrid work styles, resulting in businesses having larger employment counts in smaller spaces resulting from COVID. Our survey identified a number of areas where Bellevue rated highly among businesses, including general appearance, safety, and educational opportunity. However, the main factors identified as pain points for businesses were the lack of qualified labor, the lack of affordable housing and childcare for their employees. This again speaks to some of those specific pain points for businesses within Bellevue that, as Philly said, the city has programming to work and address both within our division and citywide. Next, we're going to see how some of those impacts impact our small business community in specific. Overall, small businesses gave Bellevue good ratings, with 80% rating Bellevue as a better place to do business than other cities and towns. This year, we also saw some of the fruits of CED's expanded business services programming in the survey results, with small businesses rating their access to support organizations and service providers 11% higher versus 2019. Despite these overall strong results, small businesses are still pressured by some of the same issues referenced previously related to workforce availability. However, small businesses in specific identified the lack of commercial or affordable commercial space as a major barrier to business. Some of these specific pain points are more pronounced among specific industries, with the tourism and information technology sectors both identifying workforce as a key barrier, or locating workforce as a key barrier. And beyond small businesses in general, the creative industry sector specifically identified the lack of commercial space as a major, affordable commercial space as a major barrier. CED is currently advancing ED plan priorities towards addressing these issues. And really among small businesses, we see the same story we see citywide. Overall, many are doing well with some specific pain points in specific sectors. And so that concludes our brief overview of the 2021 Business Survey's top line findings. Overall, Bellevue continues to receive favorable ratings from businesses. However, specific pain points related to COVID and affordability continue to negatively impact businesses. These findings will be used to inform cultural and economic development's work, including economic development plan implementation, and where applicable, inform work citywide. We'll be posting the full survey results tomorrow on our website at the link on the slide there. And we really encourage you to dig deep into those. There are a bunch of findings and a bunch of data that you can look through there if you so wish. And we thank you for your time.
Well, thank you for the presentation. That's, obviously we still have challenges, but that's very positive news. And it's a real credit to all of you to have that high of ratings during a year when everybody's emerging from COVID. So thank you for that. Next we have Mr. Miyake. Did you have anything else to add to your report?
No, Mayor, that's the end of the reports under the manager's report. Thank you.
Okay. So then we have, is there a motion to approve the consent calendar?
I move to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, thank you. So we have 3 study session items tonight. We're estimating that each one will take at least an hour. So I'm going to ask that we keep all our comments to 3 minutes at a time. We'll go around as many times as necessary to get everybody an opportunity to converse on these topics. But Mr. Miyake, would you like to introduce the first topic?
Yes, thank you, Mayor and council members. The first topic is the Cultural and Economic Development Quarterly Update. And just by way of background, the council receives quarterly updates on the economic development activities of the city. Tonight's presentation will be a report focused on economic recovery and small business assistance, with a special presentation by Visit Bellevue's Executive Director, Brad Jones, on the formation of the tourism promotion area. Tonight, staff is requesting direction to return to council at a future date with a draft interlocal agreement for the tourism promotion area. Joining us this evening is Matt Cummins, our Director of Community Development, as well as Philly Marsh, Economic Development Manager, and Brad Jones, the Executive Director of Visit Bellevue. With that, I'll turn it over to the Community Development staff to kick off the presentation.
Thank you, City Manager Miyake and Mayor, members of the council. It's good to be back with you here this evening. Heard a little bit about our business survey results earlier. Tonight, we're going to do two things. We're actually kind of doing double duty. We're going to give you our normal quarterly update, but we're going to also build in some discussion around the tourism promotion area, which is a concept that we kicked off with the council at our last quarterly update. And we wanted to start the presentation by talking to the council a little bit tonight about the relationship of the Economic Development Plan and the expansion of our Convention and Visitors Bureau business. Council may recall that we made a deliberate effort in the Economic Development Plan, which is about 1 year into its 5-year lifespan, to be much more deliberate and think about how we could grow business, particularly around leisure travel. Having been very strong in business travel through the years, there's a lot of ideas in that plan around capacity building, public-private joint ventures, and the ability to help create revenue streams to help with marketing and promotion of Bellevue. So we've been doing a lot of work behind the scenes with the Visit Bellevue staff and looking forward to having that conversation with council tonight on behalf of a number of our hoteliers and Convention and Visitors Bureau business. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to our Economic Development Manager, Philly Marsh, to start with the quarterly update, and then we'll get into the tourism promotion area discussion.
Hello again. So as Mac alluded, our agenda is going to focus on economic recovery, that small business assistance, and then dive into the tourism promotion area. A snapshot of recovery trends from the COVID pandemic. We are still ticking positively. We saw unemployment drop 0.4%, and we're focused on communicating the available jobs, internships, and apprenticeship programs across industries and connecting individuals to those opportunities. Coming up here on November 18th, we are partnering with Eastside Cities on a virtual job fair with multiple businesses across industries. Commercial real estate vacancy continues to tick down, and we'll dive a little bit into that. And then hotel occupancy, while still notably down from a year ago, is starting to see positive recovery. And again, the second half of this presentation will focus on a strategy to assist the industry with the full recovery as well as growth. So a couple of notes on commercial real estate as we continue to be cautiously optimistic with our commercial real estate market. We have seen an influx of tech companies interested in signing leases here in Bellevue. While we've seen more full floor availability in Bellevue than we've seen in recent years, that is being released very quickly. Tour activity has picked up significantly since June. Additionally, co-working space is also coming back strong. We know that tech headquarters are multipliers, so we're now seeing that multiplier effect. And additionally, in anticipation of that growth, we're also seeing increased retail activity and small business leases. So all positive signs on the commercial real estate and retail front. However, we know as we're waiting for that recovery to happen and those employees to come back into Bellevue, our small businesses still need help in getting through this pandemic. So thanks to council in allocating the $500,000 in ARPA funds for small business rent relief grants, we were able to provide 43 awards out of 155 applications that were received. The grant applications were translated into 4 languages, and we worked with community-based organizations to ensure that the opportunity was delivered to all of our businesses, and the results were 50% female-owned, 67% minority-owned, and 27% immigrant-owned businesses. We were able to meet the full need of over half of the awarded businesses, which is important because it now reduces their threat of eviction. The business community is very appreciative for this assistance and help as they continue to try to get by with this pandemic. While we work with many partners and provide many resources for small businesses, we know the needs are ever shifting, and we strive to be as responsive as possible to both the current as well as the upcoming needs of our small businesses. So you heard the findings of our full business survey earlier. We do try to do as many pulse surveys as possible. When we do have things like a grant application, we try to get some insights on what is needed to continue to support the businesses. This is a question that was asked in that grant application about what resources are needed most in the next 3 years. And as you can see, the low interest business loans rated the highest, followed by business marketing. The other category was where people could fill in their own answer, and the majority of those were additional grants, and then about another third were workforce and labor force challenges. Our Startup 45 Boost digital marketing event had 70 registrants, and 81% of those were micro businesses, 71% minority owned, and 70% women owned. So that was one area where we addressed the business marketing and are continuing to survey and understand what specifically is needed and what programs we can connect and or develop to support our businesses. So quickly, this again was kind of the abbreviated update, but we do have some more updates coming to you. One is a dedicated arts program update, and with that will include some information on the Bellevue Arts District. We'll also come back with some results of our Crossroads business outreach that we've partnered with the Chamber of Commerce on. We're developing that workforce navigation program and are excited to bring you some information on that. And then the tourism promotion area ILA, which we will bridge over and talk about the tourism promotion area here next. So with that, I'm just going to do some high level general information and then turn it over to Brad Jones to talk about the details that he's been working on with this. So again, while we're concentrating on COVID relief and recovery, we're also very invested in preparing and setting the stage for growth and investment in our key industries. And one of those key industries that has amazing potential for growth and is a fantastic partnership is our tourism industry led by Visit Bellevue. And again, today we have Brad Jones, the Executive Director, to speak on how the hospitality industry led by Visit Bellevue is preparing and investing in our destination promotion and development. So this is a tourism promotion area is a state program and mechanism for funding tourism promotion and development activities. Funds are ways to a fixed dollar assessment on lodging stays within a designated geography, and those funds are used to provide services desired by and directly benefiting the lodging businesses in that district. Funding would help support the tourism promotion and full implementation of the Bellevue Destination Development Plan. To establish a TPA, a petition must be presented to the designated legislative authority that would be outlined in an interlocal agreement. So looking forward on the progress of this tourism promotion area formation, after tonight, the first step would be working to draft that interlocal agreement that would be executed by City Council. And from there, a series of legislative items kick off, all per revised Code of Washington, to formally establish that tourism promotion area. And this would be an expected timeline in order to get that established if all proceeds positively. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Brad Jones, who will speak to the details and the stakeholder engagement that Visit Bellevue has done.
Great, thank you very much, Philly. Thank you, Madam Mayor, Deputy Mayor, council members, and City Manager. It's great to be with you this evening. In 2016 and 17, the city of Bellevue, Visit Bellevue, and our tourism industry came together to develop and approve the Bellevue Destination Development Plan. The DDP represents an 8 to 10-year roadmap to improve Bellevue's ability to attract visitors and continue to develop Bellevue as a visitor destination. The plan established 18 priority areas and articulated a shared vision for the future. We are currently 3 years into the DDP, and despite the impacts of the pandemic, we have fully implemented about 40% of the plan. Many of the additional priorities require higher funding levels and are longer term in nature. This plan has served us well and keeps everybody focused on these strategies. We are planning an update to the DDP in the coming months to be sure that the priorities remain aligned and nothing new has emerged. As part of the DDP, we established an industry key performance indicators dashboard, which helps us transparently monitor and measure activity on an ongoing basis. These key indicators include number of visitors we host, visitor spending, hotel occupancy levels, tax collections, sales, marketing, and visitor experience training and programming. We look forward to evolving these community and industry measurements as our programs expand. Embedded in the DDP was a comparative and competitive analysis to where Bellevue currently is for destination funding and what is needed to fully optimize our industry and the priorities in the DDP. This careful analysis was done so as to elevate Bellevue to competitive levels, but at the same time keep Bellevue at or below current visitation taxation rates in our market. Obviously, the goal is to expand our visitor appeal, promotional reach, and visibility while making sure we do not negatively impact demand and consumer sentiment by implementing an additional fee. Based on comparative destinations and the DDP scope, the plan calls for an annual funding at $5 million per year. Current destination funding in the Bellevue Convention Center Authority's funding plan is scheduled to achieve $2.5 million after we get to a normalized market and full pandemic recovery. The DDP calls for Bellevue to implement Washington State's already established TPA, or Tourism Promotion Area, designed exactly for this purpose. There are over 17 TPAs already in existence in Washington State, and Bellevue is one of the only destinations to not have one in place. The plan calls for this TPA to generate approximately $2.5 million per year dedicated to tourism promotion and development of our priorities. Obviously, a private-public strategy of this magnitude requires a vision, incredible partnerships, and a shared value proposition. Visit Bellevue's most important stakeholder is our lodging industry in Bellevue, and forming a future TPA is at the center of this. We have been in constant discussion with our hotels regarding a TPA since the DDP was approved. We began actively meeting with our lodging stakeholders around TPA formation about 18 months ago, and have recently held in-person industry open houses specifically geared toward the TPA background and the formation that were attended by over 90% of our properties. We hired Civitas Advisors, an industry TPA formation expert, and formed an industry-led TPA formation steering committee. After much discussion and planning, our hotels in Bellevue feel the TPA is not only needed right now more than ever, but it is important to our future industry success. They also feel that this program can fuel a more speedy and sustainable recovery as our industry emerges from the devastating impacts of the pandemic. The hotel stakeholders view this TPA as a way that they can form an active and engaged oversight body made up of their industry stakeholders to step forward and manage the new stable, reliable, and increased funding and partner with the City of Bellevue through Visit Bellevue. A typical TPA will accelerate demand by 2 to 5% per year. which would translate to almost 42 million in additional visitor spending immediately for Bellevue. Although most destinations have TPAs in Washington, I wanted to take just a moment to discuss a case study with you. In this case study, Spokane, Washington. Spokane is a good example for us because we compete with them when it comes to state and regional conventions for associations and social groups, hobby groups, youth groups, and fraternal groups. Also, Spokane has taken a proactive approach in promoting and developing themselves as a tourism destination. The Spokane TPA was one of the first in Washington to form in 2004. The per room TPA charge in Spokane started at $2 per night. And because it has been viewed as one of their most important partnerships, and they have had such positive impacts and the results they have, they're recently going to be increasing their per room TPA fee to $4. Since 2004, the number of visitors to Spokane has increased by nearly 160%, and respectively, their visitor spending has increased to $1.4 billion. The industry supports nearly 12,000 jobs, and the industry now generates $109 million in non-resident taxes. The proposed plan for the Bellevue TPA reflects the funding needs and priorities laid out in the DDP. The new fee collected by hotels from Bellevue visitors would add $2.50 per occupied hotel room. This fee would reflect the middle ground of TPA fees around us in King County and position us to raise the needed annual funding. The Washington State TPA RCW is very specific on what the funds can be used for, and it's defined as tourism promotion and would allow us to invest in much needed promotions, marketing, and programs. Clearly, Bellevue's next boom is upon us, and by acting intentionally and in partnership, we can continue to position Bellevue for future growth and success. Many of you know that future Bellevue development has several new exciting hotel projects. We are currently slated to see a 40% increase in our hotel supply within the coming 5 to 6 years. We are excited about many Bellevue development projects. They will advance our community and position ourselves for many new workers, corporate activity, business, meetings, convention, and new tourism activity. However, we simply cannot expect Bellevue to be able to attract the needed demand to sustain these new developments at current funding levels. In the last 10 years, we have already seen the need to diversify and develop our destination into a 12-month, 7-day-a-week destination. Now is the time for Bellevue to come back out of the pandemic stronger, become not only competitive with other destination strategies, but a leader within our industry, and that will align with our world-class community that can contribute to our quality of life and well-being.
Thank you, Brad. And again, we are requesting direction to return to council with the draft interlocal agreement for the tourism promotion area. And with that, we will open it up for questions and comments.
Okay, thank you. That's a great presentation. I'm going to start with Councilmember Lee, then Barksdale, Deputy Mayor Zahn, Robertson, Stokes, and myself. So Councilmember Lee, would you like to start us off?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Great proposal, Brad. This is something that we've been looking for a long time. You know, Bellevue has always been considered as the hidden gem. And so I really think that we could do a lot more. And I think partnership like you're suggesting makes a lot of sense. We, you know, and the way people are kind of worldwide, kind of bottled up for, you know, a year and a half. So I think the opportunity is here. You know, people are looking at where the recovery can happen and they can get back to normal. And I think Bellevue is probably better positioned than most cities have. And so I think this is a great opportunity. Timing is good. My only question is, because of the economy slowed down, and we are adding a additional fee for room charge. Would that kind of sort of a barrier to people wanting to jump right back? That's just that one question. What's the normal experience? What do you anticipate?
Yeah, it's a great question, and thank you for your comments. In the destination development plan and our TPA formation consultant company named Civitas has looked at this, and we've asked them to make sure that any proposal that we put forward keeps Bellevue competitive as it relates to taxation. So they've done a good job by looking at what's around us and what the tax on lodging looks like. And so we're confident with the plan that we're putting forward that we will do just that. We will still be below the median in King County. And we do not feel that it will have a negative impact on demand generation.
Okay. Do you have some numbers that you can maybe show us? That would be good. I believe you, obviously. But some cities might be more desperate. They might say, hey, we want to attract more people, so we're going to make it cheaper. But I would imagine, though, ultimately we're based on the desirability of a place. And I think we are desirable. But it would be nice, though. However, there's some, numbers, understanding. It's not going to, or based on experience, it's not going to stunt the growth in a way. So thank you. That'd be good.
Absolutely. And we'll get that chart to you. We do have a articulation of what the taxes look like around us.
Thank you.
Great. Okay, Councilmember Barksdale.
All right, thank you, Mayor, and thanks, Philly and Brett, for the presentation. In terms of the 50% commercial, 50% of small business owners mentioning that affordable commercial space was a challenge, and then thinking about the next slide that showed needed resources, was there any sort of relationship between those two? Oh, and thank you, Mac, as well. Was there any relationship between those two in terms of resources and that particular point? That's my first question. On the TPA, have we identified the boundaries? It says Redmond would be a partnering city, so that'd be all of Bellevue and all of Redmond. And if not, where would these revenue, how could we spend the revenue in terms of like other parts of Bellevue? Is this limited to downtown, for example? I'll start there. Thanks.
I'm happy to jump in on the first question, the 50% of affordable commercial space and the resources available. So what we try to do is we'll try to help our businesses basically be able to still stay fluid and positive with that commercial space. So a lot of times that comes down to marketing and making sure that we can get more traffic and more businesses, or more business to the businesses to be able to afford their rent. However, I will mention that the affordable commercial space is a strategy within our ED plan, both within the small business section as well as the retail section. We are planning to kick off a retail study early next year, and that will be something that will be examined through that if there are ways to address that affordability challenge.
Great. I'll jump in on the second question, council member. So the Washington State RCW requires any city in King County to team together with another municipality to form a TPA. So therefore, we're partnering with the city of Redmond. So as we refer to the TPA, it will actually be known as the Redmond Bellevue TPA. And within that TPA, we're allowed to set up zones. So each community will be a zone. We'll have one zone for the city of Bellevue and one zone for the city of Redmond. The Bellevue zone will encompass the entire city. We have hotels in all corners of Bellevue, and we serve tourism assets in all corners of Bellevue. So the plan would serve the entire community and be representative of the entire community.
Awesome. Thank you both.
Okay, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. So first, Mac, Philly, and I believe it was Corbin, thank you for the first part of the presentation and the update there on the ED. Two quick questions there. I think it was on slide 4 about this nearly 60% the hotel occupancy. Do you have a split on that, Philly, in terms of business versus leisure, or do we track that?
I'm going to turn that over to Brad Jones. I know he tracks many
great.
things, so he probably does have that.
Yes, we do. We track it by occupancy and we track it by spending as well. So the answer to your question is this summer, leisure travel returned to about 80% of normal.
Okay.
Business travel remained very low at about 15% of normal. That's improved slightly since then. It's probably around 20% of normal right now, so it has improved a bit. However, the bad news is leisure tourism kind of dies down a little bit after Labor Day here. So the two have kind of equaled each other out.
Gotcha. That's helpful, though. Thank you, Brad. And then the second part of that kind of the follow-up question, I guess on slide 7 there about it seemed like a fairly big increase in the digital marketing services. Is that mainly due to the pandemic and more companies needing to shift to more of an online model? Is that where that's coming from, or has that always been an area of interest?
I think it's a partially of both, but we did notice, especially early on in the pandemic, the small businesses that were struggling the most were the ones that had the least comfort level with online and social media platforms. So it was really starting with baby steps and getting them comfortable with that online opportunity to attract business through that virtual format. And so we really want to meet businesses where they are and really start from the very beginning and then build their comfort level with their digital presence and be able to introduce more tools. So that Boost digital marketing program really focused on kind of the 101 of digital marketing and websites.
Okay, great. And then Brad, appreciate the TPA presentation. In general, I'm in favor of it. Just a couple of quick questions, and just in terms of, and I get a sense of the Spokane example, which I appreciate you putting in there, but are those some of the same KPIs that we're going to be, or that you're going to be tracking in terms of, additional number of visitors, types of revenue being brought into the city? It seemed like that would be the likely case, but I'm just curious how often you would update the council, and then how are you going to separate, if possible, the revenue and the visitors based on this program versus folks that would have come here already just because it's Bellevue and we're doing a lot of things right and they want to be here and they already want to check it out. And then also, is one of the hooks, and I don't know how far you've gotten into the types of promotions and marketing, but I remember hearing, I believe from you before, that Bellevue is such a great jumping off point for the rest of the region. Is that something that's still going to be a major focus going forward? Camping, get your hotel in Bellevue, but then go visit Snoqualmie Falls or downtown Seattle or wherever you might want to go. But home base is Bellevue while you're visiting the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah, all great questions. So over the last 3 years, I think several of you have witnessed that we've done a tremendous amount of benchmarking as it relates to our data. And that was very much needed to really understand, what type of customers we serve, where they come from, and how we can best communicate with them in the future. So we have a real good benchmarking of all that. And so although the KPIs won't change a whole lot, we're able to monitor and measure the difference week to week even on what we're seeing from numbers, from spending, from our geographic target markets. And we're excited that today international travel is open, so we'll be able to begin tracking that as well. So to answer your question, I think our KPIs will remain the same, although we'll be able to do a little bit more in the way of monitoring and measuring and being able to, you alluded to, measure the incremental increase that comes to us as it relates to the TPA. That's a difficult thing to do and try to segregate, but we're going to do the best we can. And the way that we do that is through, when we launch promotions and we launch things digitally, we can attach a lot of things that we can track. And so I would just answer that by saying most of our future looking marketing is digital in nature. And so it is very highly trackable, and we'll be able to track that by the promotion. And most of that will be attached to that TPA. So I hope that makes sense to you. And when you're in the marketing business, you have to be able to tie every dollar back to a result and a return. So we want to be very purposeful about that. And then your final comment about, we call this, council member, urban base camping. And we want to make Bellevue the urban base camp for leisure tourism. And we think there's a tremendous opportunity here. And so that's the type of clientele that we're really after, for them to set up their urban base camp here, go enjoy what's around us, and come back and stay here, dine here, and enjoy our cultural amenities as well. So that's embedded and baked into the plan.
Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Zahn.
Yes, thank you. Very informative presentations, both of them. And I'm going to actually start with the Visit Bellevue first. Thank you, Brad. Having been part of the Bellevue Convention Center Authority and watched for the last 21 months the work that you've done to keep the doors open and bring tourists into our area and demonstrate just how safe and clean our area is for tourism. And I think that's great. And so I agree with the TPA. I think a couple things to maybe bring up for my colleagues is that the TPA is fully supported by the hotels, and there's a certain percentage of the hotels that buy in order for us to do the TPA. I think the other one is that how we use the money is separate from Redmond, so we can make our own decisions about how that money will be spent for the benefit of Bellevue and our tourism. And I appreciate the fact that you've done the research to make sure that we are setting the $2.50 per room night to be competitive with the others, and also to get us going on it. To think that other cities are spending over $1 million a year on tourism and promotion, and we don't have that kind of support and fees, means that being able to leverage that will give us even more opportunities and tap into the capacity, especially on the weekends. I believe that when we were prior to COVID, our weekend nights were the ones that had more capacity. So being able to tap into that, as you said, right, urban tourism, I think will be really important. So I support all of that. A couple of questions, because I couldn't remember when you and I chatted before. Would this pay for things like a circulator for tourists to hop on and off? And as we think about Major League Cricket in the future, being able to also do some promotion of that. So I'm curious about that one. And then Philly, on the presentations related to the grants, I'm glad that we were able to provide 43 awards, but that means over 100 businesses was not helped. And I worry about those 100 businesses, especially when the areas that of the most need is low interest business loans. So I would like to understand more about what we can be doing to support those small businesses, and whether there's some partnerships that we are talking with banks in the area to be able to look at these investments in our very community. So those were maybe one question for Brad and one for Philly. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Zahn, and thank you for your ongoing input and support on the BCCA board. We get to see each other every month, so thank you very much. In terms of programming, it's a great question. We've been doing a lot of planning with our steering committee on utilization of fees and really capacity building. And you're absolutely right. Typically in a normalized Bellevue market, weekends are about 20% lower occupancy than a midweek. We define midweek as Sunday through Thursday. So yes, we've always said that we want to help the market where the market needs help, and so it would obviously be weekends, and it would obviously be the seasons that we need help as well. So from programmatically, we think about 50% of the TPA would be spent in advertising, marketing, and public relations. The other 50% would be spent on program development. Things that you've talked about, programs that can bring visitors related to sports, festivals, events, cultural programming, those types of things. So there is some opportunity there, and obviously targeting those seasons and days a week that need help and the programs that we have opportunity in.
Thanks.
And in response to the low interest business loans, I'll just say that we are proactively understanding the opportunities to leverage funding as well as partners to be able to not only provide more funding, but also better access to those opportunities that are available. So there is work that is happening, and we will continue to explore and try to leverage where we can.
And is that one of our metrics, or if it's not, can it be?
We can look into that. We do track like the number of PPP loans that the Bellevue businesses were granted and other grants and funding opportunities. We can see about how we can integrate the low interest business loans. There's a lot of inputs on that across banks and community development financial institutions, et cetera. But I think we can definitely look into that and get back to you.
Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Robertson.
Thank you. So I have questions about TPA. Councilmember Zahn said that the hotel market is supporting the establishment of the TPA. I know under state law, you need to have 60% of the payors sign the petition. Has that outreach started, and how's it going? That's question number one.
Yes, great question. It started about 18 months ago when we started to talk with the hotels. We've had steering committee members for meetings for over a year, and we had an open house in July that we had the hotels come to, and they learned about the formation process, the background, destination development plan priorities. And currently, I'm happy to say that I cannot point to one hotel that does not like the idea of the TPA. So we have full support. I won't say 100% because we haven't talked to. We've had representation from about 90% of our properties. There are some properties that are between general managers, so it's difficult right now, but we will get in front of those that we have not officially talked to.
That's helpful. I'm glad that's been ongoing. Councilmember Lee asked about the numbers on, the impact of adding this additional fee to the rooms, what that would do to supply and demand. I would also note that I believe Bellevue is one of a few cities that has a higher lodging tax. We are grandfathered in at that higher rate. So I'd like to see the economic analysis numbers on that. Have we done an economic analysis?
I have not done an economic analysis on it. We've gathered the data, and we have that. We can ask our consultant to look at that, but we can work with the economic development team to do that.
Okay, great. Yeah, because we don't want to end up costing ourselves a bunch of lodging tax because we have fewer rooms going for rent. The $2.50, That will sunset and be reduced automatically to $2 in mid-2027 under state law, unless the legislature makes a change. Is that in your guys's financial plan to factor in that reduction?
Yeah, I will say the sunset is purposeful, and it's anticipated that the legislature will renew that legislation in that time. In fact, just recently, the legislature moved the current TPA legislation to allow for up to $5 per room night. So they've increased it from $2 to $5, and so we would expect them to do the same when that automatic sunset hits. Although we would obviously plan if they did not, we'd have to roll that back to $2. And I think at that time, with the additional room count in Bellevue, we'd be able to maintain the $2.5 million that it's envisioned to create.
Yes, the extra $3 that makes it to $5 that's supposed to sunset in I think June or July of 2027. Finally, do you have any financial modeling or proposed plan for the different lodging classifications and amounts, or is it all just going to be all classifications, all rooms, $250?
Yeah, it's a good question, and we've talked a lot with our hotels about this, and there was unanimous support around it being a flat fee for everybody, the same.
All right. And I would just note for my colleagues that the sports promotions, we could be promoting things like, cricket matches or swimming competitions as part of that. So just anyway, thank you. I'm looking forward to seeing this come through. I'm in favor of continuing to process it, including the ILA. Thanks.
Councilmember Stokes.
Yeah, this is very fascinating. I have a couple kind of questions, and I want to compliment Philly. Is very interesting in what you're working on, and I think you've covered some things here. And certainly we could increase the amount of funding for those different organizations. Would be great. We can work on that. I'm sure you're developing some ideas about how we can do that, and where and looking at what was missing, where we couldn't allow, give funding to certain places, and how we can improve on that. So, but that's great. And the other things with Brad kind of talking about this, and going back to the question about also on taxes, and any of these taxes, and what we're just Councilmember Robertson just discussing, it's always a balance between taxing, so taxes go to help make the Bellevue better for people coming to Bellevue. So it's that balance of how do you get them to help pay for it, but at the same time, so it's a good balance. And I think we're looking at that. So it's always important to try to work with it. And as indicated, sometimes the legislature gives us a little pain on some of these things. So, but you're doing a great job on that. On the TPA, it's a great idea, and I hope it works very well. A question I had is, why not include Kirkland in that? I mean, we have the Innovation Triangle. We work together. Kirkland is really growing, and there's a lot of activity there. In fact, in terms of culture and art, they have a lot going on. So what was the decision making on just going with Redmond?
I've been asked that a lot, and it's a great question. In looking at our portfolio in Bellevue, it matches very well with Redmond. We also serve very like companies and business travel and meetings. Also, Redmond has a larger capacity, meaning more hotel rooms than Kirkland does. So we looked at that alignment from a business perspective, and we wanted the market to be similar when it comes to Bellevue and Redmond in terms of purchasing travel product and alignment in terms of our supply. So that's mainly why we looked at it. And Redmond was quick to jump on and say yes to the partnership. We could always go back in the future if Kirkland does add more hotel rooms and more capacity, and we could always revisit that. But those were the reasons, Councilman.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense. Yeah. The other thing I want to mention, and I'm glad to see you're really improving the whole process, or the idea of Bellevue as the base, the place you want to be, so you can go to the whole Northwest, this whole region and everything. I remember 5 years ago going to a hotel over in Eastgate and having a big event, and that was one of the things they were really interested in. We talked about that, and I think that's when BDA started. Visit Bellevue started really talking about that. So I'm glad to see you're increasing it. It's just it's a great idea, and I think we have a lot of ways to make that really work, and it's really interesting to get people here and then see Bellevue. And sometimes it gets them to Bellevue because they have a hotel here and they go someplace else, but then they get to see Bellevue. And if they'd gone to Seattle or someplace else, they wouldn't see it. So it has all those other benefits to it too. So I really appreciate that, and you're really making it an even more successful project down the line. So thank you.
Well, I just have a quick question. Can you tell me what percentage pre-COVID tourism was a part of our economy?
Oh boy, that's a stumper. I couldn't tell you. I could tell you that we were at about 1.8 billion in total economic impact for hospitality and tourism. I'm not sure what the total Bellevue economy was. So, but I know we were at 1.8 billion.
As I recall correctly, it's a pretty sizable portion of the pie. And so I think this is a really good investment in not only regaining where we were, but also tapping that weekend market that we hadn't tapped before. So I'm really excited about this proposal. Very supportive of the TPA. So that is all I have to say. Are there any other comments or question? I'd like to move this on to the vote if we can. Is there a motion, Deputy Mayor?
I move to direct staff to draft an interlocal agreement for the tourism promotion area and bring the agreement back for council consideration and action at a future meeting.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, that passes. It is 7:18. We will come back at 7:25 promptly, please. Okay, we have a quorum. We are going to resume here in just a minute. Mr. Miyake, would you like to introduce the next study session item?
Sure, Mayor. The next study session topic is the second item on your agenda, and that is the 2021-2022 mid-biennium budget update. This evening is the third serving of the 21-22 mid-biennium update. Tonight, staff will provide the council with an informational overview of all the mid-biennium changes, including operating and capital revenues and expenditures for council consideration, discussion, and an update of the general fund forecast. Joining us this evening are Tony Call, the director, as well as Evan Phillips, city budget manager, both from the finance and asset management department. With that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Tony to kick off the presentation. Tony.
Thank you, City Manager Miyake, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and council members. As always, it is a pleasure to be with you this evening. As Mr. Miyake mentioned, this is the third of several discussions on the mid-biennium update. It is focused primarily on technical items, as it is required by RCW that we bring back a mid-biennium in the midpoint in the two-year budget cycle. So this mid-biennium you're going to see this evening is really based off the adopted council budget for the 21-22 council budget from last year. Next slide, please. Our agenda this evening is a reminder of the calendar in action. You've seen those slides before. Evan Phillips is here and will give us a recap of the 21-22 adopted budget, again, which is the policy basis for the mid-buy. He'll give an overview of the mid-buy adjustments, then he'll send it back to me for a quick update and information on the general fund forecast. Next slide, please. This is the calendar in front of us. We were here on October 18th. We went through a process update. October 25th, Director Brennan was here and did a development services update. At that time, council did direct to return with the appropriate legislation for the adoption package. Tonight is November 8th. Next week, November 15th, is the public hearing. Following the public hearing, staff will be seeking direction from council to either bring back an adoption package on November 22nd or to bring back other matters as directed by council on November 22nd and then have adoption later, either December 6th or December 12th. Next slide, please. You've seen this before. There are 4 items that will need to be adopted by council in order to implement the mid-buy: development services, bank capacity. Council will need to set the 22 property tax levy ordinance. And then of course, the last one is the umbrella ordinance or the mid-buy ordinance, which sets the funds and appropriations for all funds across the city. It also includes some administrative items such as pay plans and donations under $90,000. Next slide, please. I think with that, I will turn it over to Evan to start us with where we ended with the general fund being balanced for the 21-22 budget. Evan?
Thank you, Tony. Before we dive into the mid-buy, I think it's worth taking a moment to recall how the city balanced the general fund in the adopted 21-22 budget before we outline proposed technical changes in the mid-buy. So as you may recall, the adopted budget was solving for a $32 million shortfall over the biennium, and we had a 4-pronged financial strategy to balance the budget. The first strategy was containing costs. The city reduced spending for discretionary expenditures, including travel training, professional services, and temp help, and took a more reactive approach to non-safety related maintenance, including reduced service levels for mowing, weeding, and watering. The second strategy we used was one-time bridge structures where possible to buy time until the city's financial picture became clear. These included the phased opening of Fire Station 10 and doing a temporary 2-year transfer of sales taxes from the CIP into the general fund. The adopted also adjusted for modest increases in revenues, including a 1% property tax adjustment and increasing compliance with the city's B&O taxes, among others. Additionally, the adopted budget invested in human services and equity programs, including the Communities of Color Coordinating Team. These 4 balancing strategies are the starting point for the city's 21-22 proposed mid-biennium budget. So over the next few slides, I'll provide a summary level look at the proposed mid-buy budget for 21-22. And as you can see on your screen, the proposed continues some of the financial strategies that I mentioned, including the 1% property tax adjustment, as well as the sales tax swap from the CIP to the general fund. Additionally, as part of the mid-biennium process, we reevaluate the economic picture for the second year of the biennium. Remember that the revenue picture that was taken last year during the budget process was months before any vaccine had been approved and distributed, and it remained unclear when the economy would reopen and how quickly. In 2021, the city has seen an uneven recovery across sectors of the economy. Sectors that require in-person services like our hospitality industry are still slow to recover, while industries like information technology and other online services remained more stable through 2020 and 2021. The city's sales and B&O taxes are returning to pre-pandemic levels, primarily due to high levels of construction activity throughout the city. The other side of that economic picture is that we have seen higher year-to-year inflation than was anticipated. Supply chain and other economic issues have increased prices across the board. For the city, this means inflated costs for our operations, including personnel. So while returning to pre-pandemic revenues is a step in the right direction, the city lost a year of potential revenue growth in 2020 and faces steep cost increases for running current city operations. In total, these adjustments represent a mixed bag for the city. As we see construction activity bring B&O and sales taxes back to 2019 levels, other sectors of the economy are still incrementally coming back online. All the while, the rise in prices are holding the city's financial position in check. So this proposed mid-biennium adjusts for our budget to reflect these current economic realities. As I mentioned in the previous slide, the 1% property tax that was included in the 21-22 adopted budget is still assumed for 2022 and will require council action when the mid-biennium is adopted on either November 22nd or December 6th. In 2021, a $1 million home would pay $8,846 in property taxes, of which 10%, or roughly $885, would go to the city of Bellevue. The remainder goes to local schools, the Washington State School Fund, King County, and other local governments and agencies that do everything from flood control to EMS and to the Port of Seattle. The 2022 rate for Bellevue with a 1% property tax adjustment would impact a $1 million home by $9 annually. This next slide highlights the key changes that are included in the proposed mid-biennium. Starting with the general fund, these adjustments include the updated revenues that we've been discussing tonight. Additionally, we include technical adjustments to the city's expenditures to account for the higher than expected 6.3% inflation, as well as other miscellaneous adjustments for the reorganization of positions, truing up of Arch and Norcom contributions, among others. While minor, mid-biennium updates include the correction of errors that happened during the biennial budget process, which are cleaned up in this proposed mid-biennium. Our budget consists of tens of thousands of lines, so occasionally there are errors that require correction, Additionally, this mid-buy does round out the implementation of council priorities included in the 21-22 adopted budget, including converting a limited term employee coordinating homelessness and outreach to a full-time employee, as well as including a new daytime battalion chief starting in July 2022 to support the phased opening of Fire Station 10. As for other funds in the city, we are making minor adjustments to the CIP to better reflect anticipated revenues. In the housing fund, the city proposes budgeting 2 revenue-backed Arch positions that council considered on September 20th. Also in the Human Services Fund, the city is including spending authority to spend a portion of the $1.5 million Amazon donation received this year in 2021. And finally, for both the Housing and Human Services funds, the mid-biennium includes spending to continue the second year of early funding opportunities for behavioral health and housing-related services resulting from House Bill 1590. Now I'm going to hand the presentation back to Tony Call to discuss the latest general fund forecast.
Thanks, Evan. So just a reminder, whenever we think about a general fund forecast or any forecast for that matter, it really is an estimate of our financial future. It is based on the best information we have today. And when we're talking about something like the recovery of a pandemic, it's still a little slippery as to all the information we know today versus what we might know 6 months from now. So the forecast you're going to see today is the best thing we know today. Its purpose, as we've talked about before in the past, is really to help assist us in understanding what might happen in the future as we make financial decisions today. Next slide, please, Evan. So before I jump into the forecast, let me talk a little bit about the drivers of the 6-year forecast that you're going to see in a minute. We still have a very uncertain future. We are still living in a pandemic, and that, of course, does limit us on all the information we might know. As Evan mentioned, we will head back to 2019 levels by year-end 2021. And one of the key elements of our forecast is really our economically sensitive revenues, which is our business and occupation tax and our sales tax. They both grow very similarly. So what you have in front of you tonight is how we are comparing ourselves, our forecast, compared to other Seattle, King County, and state forecasts for their sales tax growth. You can see on the chart we compare fairly well. As you notice in the out years in 24 and 25, we're a tad bit lower than King County and higher than the state. And you might be wondering why that might be. The reality is it's a bit of math is the true answer. We have had very high construction in 21 and 22 to the tune of about $1.4 billion in permits issued. It will take several years for that to come through into our sales tax forecast. We're holding that forecast fairly high into those out years, which is not showing a greater growth. It's keeping it fairly flat. So that's why you see a slightly lower number, but we are assuming substantial growth in sales tax. It will continue to go strong, and it does include construction sales tax to continue to stay high. On the flip side, expenditures are still going to be driven by inflation, and the supply chain is still clogging up the system out there. As current economists are saying, we should still see inflationary pressures into 2023. We'll know more in the next few months as maybe we get lucky and maybe some of the supply chain can open up for us a bit. Currently, we're focusing on fairly high inflation factors for the out years. Next slide, please. Talking about construction, I wanted to kind of give you a peek of how construction has grown in relation to sales tax. So what this chart shows you is the 6 major sectors of sales tax. If you added up any one year, you'd get to 100%. What you'll see is most of those that don't have the red circle kind of look fairly normal. They kind of all fall within a margin of error of any given year. You see 2, which you've really seen some changes in. So construction in 2019 was under 20% of our sales tax. Heading into 2021, we're close to 25% of our sales taxes in construction. The value information in that is that construction continues to be, for these large buildings, substantially one-time money. As long as the development cycle continues, that will continue. When and if the development cycle starts to wane, that one-time money will start to creep back down. So it's something that the budget office is keeping a firm eye on and tracking the development services pipeline. The other red circle you see here spoke a little bit earlier in the tourism presentation, and again in Evan's earlier comments. Our hospitality or our food and accommodation areas have not yet come back to 2019 levels. You can see 2020 is half of what 2019 was, and 2021 is just a bit higher than that. As we plan for the out-year forecast, we are assuming a slower recovery in those areas and are continuing to watch them as well. So the forecast you see assumes higher value of construction and, again, slow growth in food and accommodation. Next slide, please. This is the forecast you've seen several times over in the past. It shows that expenditures will continue to outstrip revenues, given that nothing changes. I would challenge that each year that the council adopts a budget, they adopt a balanced budget. So every time we close a budget here, we bring those two lines to center because we need to adopt a balanced budget. Heading into 23-24, you will see that we are currently forecasting that expenditures will be higher than revenues as we head into the next budget cycle. The reason for that is a couple of fold. The first is property tax and the structures of property tax. Currently, property tax grows by 1% plus new construction. When inflation is growing at something close to 6.3% in 2022, there's obviously a gap as we just start the forecast. We have started in a deficit position on the property tax revenue stream. The other piece that I think is relevant is as the city continues to experience substantial growth, the city will over time continue to see more complex and urbanized services. And that's going to help drive that expenditure line as well. So things for us to consider and think about as we head into the 23-24 budget. We're not looking for action today in the mid-buy. It is a precursor to help us think about as we head into 23-24 what the forecast looks like, and also help us understand what financial decisions we make today would impact the forecast. With that, next slide, please, Evan. Coming back to our mid-biennium dates, again, next week, public hearing. We'll be looking for, after the public hearing, direction from council on whether to bring an adoption package on November 26th or November 22nd, or to bring other matters. And with that, Mayor, I believe I am sending it back to you. Thank you, Mayor.
Well done. All right, thank you for that presentation. So I'm going to call in order, starting with Councilmember Barksdale, followed by Lee, Zahn, Robertson, Stokes, Deputy Mayor, and myself. Councilmember Barksdale, would you like to start us off?
Great, thank you, Mayor. No major questions. Just was curious about the services industry. It looked like there was a forecast for it to decrease in the coming year, and I was just curious. I mean, because that's, I guess that's separate from retail, so I was just curious what.
Sure. Sure. For the services industry is substantially the IT growth and the financial sectors kind of broadly. 2020 was a fairly large year for that sector as we all went home to work and new services were needed. So we're seeing a small decline in 2022 and 2023, but nothing that I would consider is substantive. I wouldn't think it's statistically a statistical change. It certainly is a fluctuation that I think is fairly normal.
Thank you. The metaverse is going to change that though, right?
Okay.
Councilmember Lee.
Thank you. Wow, great presentation. Crisp, to the point, numbers, very well done, both of you. And to the point. A great showing of the reality. So everything is, presented. The one thing that obviously of concern is inflation, right? We can control that. And also I can see, you're already setting me up for property tax increase. And yes, if we want to continue, if that's the only solution, only answer, but we forget the other part of the equation is expenditure control, right? We can't control inflation, we can control a lot of other things. And but we have all the elements you pointed out: construction, sale. It's all good. So I think we have time. If we're talking about, we're not looking at this biennium, we're looking at the future. I may even consider this 1% property tax this time because of the pandemic, right? It's a real drag on us, so it might be a real exception. But I think moving forward, this gap you show, I've always, have questions on that revenue expenditure. But we always, however, look at one side. We don't look at the other side. I believe we need to. We got time. I already want to appeal to the council and take a look. We can't just always say yes to everything, right? Situation as such as presented reality by Tony very, very capably. Let's think. What can we do to look at the other side of the equation? And I'd be very, very thankful if we do that. And we have a year, starting now, to look at that. So I hope that we have some answers. So that's it. So good, well done. Good job.
Thank you for that brief comment and question. Councilmember Zahn.
Yes, thank you. Appreciate the thoroughness of your review of the budget and making sure that we are coming up with the best estimate for our financial future. I do have a couple of questions or comments. The 16 million over the 2 years on the cost containment, I would like to understand of the pieces that we tightened our belt on, what were some lessons learned from that, and where would be areas where we would want to recommend continuing, and where are the places where perhaps we cut so deeply that we're not actually providing the very services that are needed, especially your comment about the complex urbanized services. So when we think about being ready for the opening of the light rail, and as we have all of these construction projects opening, how do we make sure that we have adequate services and that we're proactive about it and have them in place instead of being reactive? So I'd like to understand a bit more about that. And then the other one about the sales tax swap of CIP to general fund, how long we think that's going to continue, because we do have a lot of capital improvement projects and infrastructure we need to take care of. Although with the federal infrastructure package passing, perhaps there's some money there that will come our way that we can leverage to work on some of our infrastructure. So I'd like to understand what portion of those infrastructure dollars we might be able to obtain as part of either grant funding or allocation, and how that might fit into our budget. I wasn't clear on the bonding against the 1590. Is that something that is contemplated within the budget, or we are expecting that the bonding would not happen in the 2022, so it would be in future years? Because I do think that is a level of funding or funding potential that we can leverage to take care of some of the issues that we have. And then lastly, the 6.3%, I think it is a lot of the supply chain and the issues associated with that. I think we really need to look carefully at how realistic the 3.7 next year and all the way back to 2.5, and really how realistic that is. I think we have taken advantage of refinancing to lower interest rates, so thank you for that, whether there's additional opportunities for that or not. So really looking at the whole picture. Thank you.
I think I've got 5 questions from you. I think I'll do my best I can to get to all 5 of them. So I'll start with the ones that I got first. So I'll pick the easy ones off first. Sales tax swap, council only authorized that for 2 years, for years 21 and 22. So that would not, so when we head into 23, the CIP would be fully funded with sales tax unless council gives different direction. So that's the first question. Lessons learned from the reductions that we took last year. I think that's a really good question, and we can do some research into that. I don't have an answer for you off the top of my head. I don't know of any citizen impact that I've heard of, but I certainly can do some lessons learned and find out where we're at and talk to our departments on that. So I will have to get back to you on that answer. The infrastructure bill that passed over the weekend, yes, I think that I've got calls into Lacey Jane, and we'll spend some time trying to understand all the pieces in that and try to figure out what money can come to Bellevue. Because of course, with Bell Red coming online and the fact that Sound Transit's coming to the city, I think we're a good contender. So we'll have to get back to you on that piece. Bond against 1590, I believe the next time or so that community development comes back with 1590 discussions, I believe that's part of their discussions in the near-term future. So as council prepares to think about the next set of funding and opportunities with the 1590 funding, we can come back at any point with those types of conversations. And you are right on the inflation. We've used several services to try to figure out what we think an inflation forecast looks like. We've kind of gone back in time and looked at coming off the Great Recession. How did inflation work when it came down to almost zero, and then what it came back looking like? It's not that much different than we're seeing now. We went back and looked at Katrina and said, how did inflation come back after Katrina? We've done that, plus used all of our services. It's our best guess today. And as I tell most people, the forecast is printed and it's probably wrong. So I will certainly put some energy into next year as getting a few more months under our belt, and hopefully we can get a little better idea of what that inflation in the out years might look like.
Thank you.
Did I miss anything?
We're good. Thank you.
Okay, perfect.
Councilmember Robertson, followed by Councilmember Stokes.
Thanks. Tony, on the sales tax numbers, I was surprised by the number on auto sales, which has always been one of our largest single source sales tax numbers. Because there's been a shortage on automobiles, I was really surprised to see it as stable as it is. What do you have an updated projection on that?
I have some thoughts on it. So I've done some of this is not analytical. Some of this is just driving around town and looking at car lots and seeing how many cars are sitting on lots. So I do think that we'll continue to look at that coming out of the supply chain and seeing how our auto sales continue to look. Right now, they look very strong for 2021. Partly that's because of the price of autos has gone up, right? So sales tax is based on a price. So you might have fewer transactions, but if price is going up, our number would stay substantially the same or something close. If the supply chain eases up and people buy more cars, that number might actually creep back up a little bit higher. I know it's not completely analytical. Some of that is just reading the newspaper and paying attention, but I think that's probably the drivers behind auto sales.
Well, that's very helpful. I liked the comment about from Councilmember Zahn about lessons learned. I think that's something that we should discuss next year in the biennial budget. Because we have this structural gap coming our way. And to that end, I know we've talked about potentially looking at maybe doing a parks levy or operations and maintenance levy or some other things that would help fund those things that Bellevue values so much. I think that we should look at, if we have time next year, at how we rebalance our revenue, because property tax is super, super stable. Utility tax is also super stable. But some of these changeable ones, that is really impacted with Bellevue having such a high percentage of B&O and sales tax, et cetera. It really puts us in an up and down, unstable situation when we have big swings. So I don't know if that's something that we will have time to look at next year, but how we might rebalance that. It'd be nice to have a more stable source be a little bit bigger portion of our budget so that we don't have these extreme swings that we've been having. So that's just a comment. And then the structural gap, I don't know if you redid that projection, but with CPI being as high as it is, and all of our, since our employees' cost of living is tied to CPI, and the capital projects are even probably higher than the CPI, and the construction CPI is even higher. That's really going to affect our ability to deliver services next year, and really on the employees and benefits be a significant impact on our general fund. So I don't know did you recast those numbers? And we got to figure out a solution next year to that. You did recast them?
We did run the forecast out for all the out years. It includes, so the last forecast that we published, Councilmember Robertson, would have come with our adopted budget, which was right smack in the middle of the pandemic. And we had no idea how the economy was going to recover at that point in time. So our revenues are stronger than that particular forecast that came back at that time. So we have recast both sides of the equations, the revenues and the expenditures. And we have included those higher inflationary rates that you saw on the slide, the 6.3 in 21, the 3.7-ish in 2022, dropping back down to somewhere in the mid twos by 2026. So we've included both sides of that equation. And I think the gap has become actually a little bit smaller than it was forecasted back in our adopted budget timeframe.
Okay, well, that's good. So since this is just a mid-buy year and we have this big gap looking to fill next year, I certainly do not plan to do anything other than approve the budget as proposed by staff. I don't think that we need to add on additional expenditures, particularly if we don't have additional revenue sources or cuts to fill those. So I'm planning to just support it as written, and I appreciate very much all the work you do.
Thank you, Councilmember Robertson.
Thank you. Okay, Councilmember Stokes.
Yeah, really appreciate the presentation and the hard work that you do and smart work that you and your staff do to get us to this stage. This is I don't know, have you had a time as wild as this one in your time you've been here? Yeah, it's so different, isn't it? We're all facing that, but I think fortunately we have the work you're doing, and I agree in a number of the comments that Councilmember Robertson was just talking about. And this is just a buy to kind of adjust things. It's not a time for more expenditures and all that. So I think you've made a great proposal on this and given us some things to look at and really start thinking about for next year when the next big budget comes up. That's where we go forward. It's unfortunate this 1% is just so far out of reality that it's almost ridiculous, in particular when you have the 6% or more coming in and the other factors and the growth of the city. And growth is good. It doesn't necessarily pay for itself. And 1% or just doesn't really give us the tools we need from those factors. And of course we have other resources, but we're expected to deliver services and work with this growth. And to do that, we have to have funding. So it's a circular thing we always have to deal with. And I think, again, you're giving us the tools to look at this. And I think you set a very good stage to get us through this time period, get through the buy, and then move forward next year. And that's the time that we can, when the budget comes up, we can really try to tackle these things and get it out of the way. So thanks very much. I'm also wanted to say that I think we really do have to look at a parks levy and other resources from things we have in. Again, things which add to what we see so great in Bellevue. And in order to get there and get even better, we have to finance it. So it's that continual battle. But again, I don't have any questions about it. And the questions that have been asked have been things I was thinking about. But again, just appreciate you and your staff's work on this and giving us the opportunity to be reasonable and prudent, but at the same time, reach out to do things that are amazing. So thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, Tony, you had a great job on the presentation. Thank you so much for the update here on the mid-buy. And boy, if I were to describe this in one word, it would be uncertainty, I think, at the end of the day. And certainly there are some things of concern regarding that lost year of revenue and the inflation at 6.3%, the supply chain issues, the segments of the economy, quite frankly, that still haven't recovered from the pandemic, namely the hotels, restaurants, et cetera. And then, also that greater alliance or reliance on the construction industry that you rightly pointed out. That's also of concern, as well as those industries that haven't recovered. So boy, and then looking at 2023, when we see expenditures running higher than our revenue, some big decisions will have to be made at that time. But as I think some of my colleagues have already mentioned, now is the time to kind of stay the course. Stay with the budget as written, any minor adjustments as needed, but we're just not in a place to add any significant expenditures at this point, given where we are. But really appreciate this holistic view of where we're at as a city, and appreciate the hard work that went into that. So thank you so much.
Yeah, as the deputy mayor said, it's not just about regaining lost revenue. It's about the inflation that we're dealing with as well. So I see the challenge, but a few things. I'd really like to address the bonding of 1590 in the first quarter of next year, if I'm correct. I believe that if the state were to change the rules and we haven't bonded, they could actually change our ability to collect it. But once we're bonded, they cannot. So I think it's important that we move on that sooner than later. I also support the idea of the parks levy, but I'd like us to be looking at a parks and arts levy. I think there's a real desire for both those things. So I'd like to examine that. And, one thing about our city, I always feel we're so good that when we do have growth, we always give back to the community because the community is impacted by the growth. We do that in a number of ways. And one thing that we are hearing from quite a bit from the community is a strong desire to re-examine the ability for developers to clear cut lots. And we've had some really good recommendations made from the community. I know that in our environmental stewardship initiative, we are committed to listening to the experts in our community when they bring a recommendation. And I've seen a very good recommendation brought to me anyway on what we might do to address this issue. So I'm very interested in looking at what would it take? How much money would it take just to look at those tree codes? And because I think it would make we're having tremendous development right now. And every day a new lot is being cleared for a new house. I don't think we have that much time to wait to look at this. I really don't. I think it's making a big impact on the community, on the character of the community, and on the environment. And there's a tremendous amount of interest in this. So I don't know if we can do it, but I'd like to hear back from you if there's any place you think we could find the ability to address that, if that was of interest to the rest of the council as well. So I know you can't answer that tonight, but
we can certainly bring information back for you. I'll work with the city manager's office on a response back. Is there anything else, city manager, that you would like me to respond on that?
No, sorry, I had trouble unmuting. No, that sounds good. I was thinking the same thing. We'll provide some kind of response back to the council.
Thank you. Okay, great presentation. Really appreciate it. And good job balancing the books yet once again. Very challenging time. We are going to take a real quick break. We'll come back at 8:10 and then we will tackle our last study session item. Okay, we have everybody back. We have a quorum back anyway. So Mr. Miyake, would you like to introduce the last study session item?
Sure, Mayor. Thank you. The last study session is a follow-up to the Cascade water lines' future water supply options. And just by way of background, on September 27th, the Cascade Water Lines CEO briefed the council on its future water supply options and proposed establishment of the Water Supply Development Fund as a key part of its funding strategy. At the same meeting, the council requested the Bellevue staff to return to address a number of questions that were raised at the meeting, as well as provide its own analysis and recommendations on the best way to provide water for the future at the best rates. So per the council's request, the utility staff will present its analysis and recommendations on the Cascade Water Alliance's future water supply option and its proposal to establish a water supply development fund. So tonight we are seeking direction from the council, although it just said informational only on the agenda memo, our mistake. We are seeking direction from the council in the form of some form of direction to Councilmember Stokes, who represents the city on the Cascade Water Alliance board, who will be taking up this matter for a vote at their November 17th board meeting. So with that, I am going to turn this over to Nav Otal, our director of our utilities department. She is prepared to provide you a 15 to 20 minute presentation on answering the questions, as well as the utilities perspective on and position on the Cascade Water Alliance proposal. Nav?
Thank you, Mr. Miyake. Good evening, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Newhouse, and council members. First of all, can you see my slide?
Yes.
And it should be just a slide and not anything else on it?
Yeah, it's a cover slide in presentation mode.
Perfect, perfect. Well, I appreciate you saving the best for last. So I have your undivided attention. So the purpose of today's presentation is to address council's questions regarding Cascade's future water supply options, and then to provide staff analysis and recommendations. And this is still, as Mr. Miyake mentioned, we are looking for direction for going forward. So tonight's agenda is to provide you some background, including addressing the questions you raised, giving you a summary of future water supply options and associated costs, give you a little bit of a summary of long-term water supply and demand projections, and then finally our analysis and a recommendation. As you may recall, on September 27th, Cascade presented information on its future water supply options and the proposal to establish the Water Supply Development Fund, or which I'll call it WSDF going forward. And you posed a number of questions that you wanted staff to address, and you wanted us to provide analysis and recommendation, especially on going forward, what is the best way to provide water in the future at the best rates. One of the questions that was posed was, why are Bellevue water rates high? And I will say Bellevue water rates are high. There are 4 expense categories that drive our budget and rates. The 2 main ones, rate drivers, are investment in Bellevue's infrastructure and Cascade's water supply costs. So let me address the capital investments, which is this orange slice here. So as you can see, in 2021, we are planning to invest $16.9 million in capital infrastructure. This amounts to about 27% of water utilities budget. As a reminder, other than Seattle transmission lines, all of the infrastructure in Bellevue is owned and operated by Bellevue. This includes hundreds of miles of pipe, reservoirs, pump stations, and all the other infrastructure needed to deliver water to our customers. These costs have increased over the years because we're actively replacing or repairing Bellevue's infrastructure. The second cost driver is payments to Cascade, which is at about $24.3 million, is about 38% of the utilities budget. This is the largest cost for the water utility, and these costs increase every year. As an example, our costs from Cascade have increased 35% since 2013, or just over $6 million a year. And these increased costs must be recovered through Bellevue customer charges. So what makes up Cascade's costs? As a regional water supplier, Cascade has 2 major expense categories. One is the cost to buy water from Seattle, which is $21.1 million, or about 43% of their budget. This is the cost of the contract, the current contract with Seattle. The remaining costs, about $28.7 million, or about 57% of Cascade's budget, is for operating and capital costs and debt service to pay for purchase of lake taps and other capital expenses. These are Cascade's current costs. They do not include any proposed funding to develop lake taps as a potable water source or to fund WSDF. You asked us to review the water supply options presented by Cascade and their impact on Bellevue ratepayers. This table shows you the 6 options Cascade evaluated to secure permanent source of water supply in the future. Option 1 is to develop lake taps phase 1 by 2042 per schedule of Cascade's water right. This option would mean that lake taps needs to be developed by 2042. Cascade is not pursuing this option at this time. Instead, they've asked staff to, Cascade board is pursuing options 2 through 4. And they have a lot of similarities, 2, 3, and 4. So option 2 is to negotiate a 15-year contract extension with Seattle, which would make the current contract go out to 2055, and then develop lake taps in 2055. Option 3 is similar in that, but except that it is negotiating a 20-year contract extension with Tacoma out to 2059 and develop lake taps. Option 4 is the same as option 3. The only difference is that this option requires obtaining an agreement with Seattle to move lake taps water through Seattle's pipes to Cascade members. And all 3 of these options require operate under the assumption that lake taps would be developed either in 2055 or in 2059. And so these options, the cost of this project will range anywhere from $2.4 billion to $3 billion. And for all of these options, Cascade plans to establish a water supply development fund to pay for developing lake taps. And that is shown here. And this fund would accrue roughly $1.2 billion in cash for the project. Half of that cost will be paid for by Bellevue. Option 5 and 6 were considered by a Cascade board, but rejected by the board. Option 5 is similar to options 2, 3, and 4, except that it is getting a contract, 20-year contract with Everett, and then developing lake taps in 2059. This option, this would require construction of a pipe between Clearview and Woodinville, and that pipe may not be needed if you develop lake taps ultimately. And that's why that option was rejected by the board. The final option, option 6, was to explore a long-term purveyor contract with Seattle. This option would not require developing lake taps. And so one of the questions that you posed to us was, why was Seattle purveyor contract option rejected? So this option was rejected because of the board's concerns over not being able to negotiate a cost-effective contract with Seattle. And also this option was contingent on selling lake taps. All of these options, one thing they have in common is that, other than the option 6, is ultimate development of lake taps. What I wanted to do was, because developing lake taps is going to be a very complicated project with many decisions that have yet to be defined. So over the next few slides, I'd like to just walk you through the infrastructure that would be needed to develop lake taps as a potable water source and deliver it to Cascade members. So this is a very busy slide, and you will see this over and over again. Right now, all I would like to do is focus on just one thing, which is this orange area is Cascade members. When Cascade was formed in 1999, there were 8 members that included Bellevue, Kirkland, Redmond, Sammamish Plateau, and you can see the various jurisdictions. And that's shown in the orange area. In 2012, Covington, shown here, withdrew its membership from Cascade. Now, the next part I'd like to kind of draw your attention to is where the regional infrastructure is. So these blue lines that you see here and going down and then coming from this side, these are Seattle's pipes. Down here, going through Covington area, this is Tacoma's infrastructure. And I want to draw your attention to that because that's important in getting a reference point on where Seattle system is, where Tacoma system is, and where Lake Taps is. So this here is Lake Taps. Down, if you can see my cursor, the area surrounded this rectangle in red, that is Lake Taps. And ultimate development of Lake Taps to get and to deliver that water to the Cascade members, which is the options 2 through 4, would require 87 million gallon per day treatment plant down here. It would also require 30 miles of 66-inch pipeline, and that's shown here in this this orange right here on the left side. In addition, there would be a pump station in the Tukwila area. There would also need to be a 20 million gallon reservoir right in South Bellevue. Now, there are Cascade is contemplating 2 ways to have that reservoir. One is to see if Seattle Public Utilities would sell an existing reservoir that is located close to this area. The other would be to site a new 20 million gallon reservoir in Bellevue. Finally, there would need to be a transmission pipe between, so this is where the Lake Taps water ends then, in one of these reservoirs. Then there would need to be a way to get water through Bellevue and also to Redmond and Kirkland. Again, there are 2 decision points here. One is to see if Seattle would either sell or allow Cascade to use Seattle's transmission line to convey Lake Taps water through Bellevue and to other Cascade members. The other would be, which is shown here in this magenta color, would be to construct a parallel transmission line through Bellevue in order to deliver that water. So this, the reason I wanted to walk you through this is so you get a good sense of what does it entail to actually develop Lake Taps and get that water to Cascade members. Then the other decision point, and there are multiple routes that Cascade is looking at. This is one, this area shown in green, that's one route that they're contemplating. This is another route. And this might be the third route. So these decisions have not been made yet. But somehow you need to get Lake Taps water from down below up to Bellevue and other Cascade members. And which corridors developed is yet to be determined. So in summary, what I'd like to say is that Lake Taps supply project is a very complicated project, and there are many uncertainties about the project, including the ultimate level of treatment that will be required on the quality of Lake Taps water and the future regulations. The current project costs are for phase 1. So the $2.4 to $3 billion is to develop phase 1. The ultimate cost and timing of constructing phase 2 is another variable. Another issue is the constructability of pipe corridor routes. And you are looking at 30 miles of transmission pipe from Lake Taps to Bellevue. This is going to require permits, mitigation for any environmental impacts, and property and easement acquisition. Another variable is this reservoir that's needed in South Bellevue. Siting a large reservoir in Bellevue, a 20 million gallon reservoir, will be a challenge, as will be constructing a pipeline through middle of Bellevue. So another uncertainty is that there are a number of assumptions that say either we will use Seattle's system, Cascade will use Seattle's system, or, for example, the reservoir or the pipeline. And there's uncertainty that some project alternatives that are depending on Seattle's willingness to allow Cascade to purchase or use Seattle's infrastructure. Another question that you asked us to address is there sufficient regional water supply in the future? So this is a slide you saw on September 27th. This is from Cascade. And I thought that I would just take a moment, because again, this is a very busy slide. Let me kind of walk you through it. So this line at the top, this line in red, is the current total regional supply. It is roughly 425 million gallons a day. That is the current supply that's available in the region. This black line here is what is currently being used. And so what you can see is that what's currently being used is about 200 MGDs, million gallons a day. So it is less than half of the regional supply. Now, back even as recently, which is 2007 is actually pretty recent, future projections was this green line that basically regional projection said we will run out of water in 2055. That is what this green line says. And then Cascade's water needs were on top of that. So this is the environment under which building lake taps was being considered, because there was fear of not having enough water in the region. This here is the current forecast. So this purple or blue line is current forecast as of 2019. This shaded area is now layering on Cascade members' usage, and that is Cascade's future forecast to 2060. You can see that there in 2060, there is still 150 MGDs of regional supply available. So to answer your question, yes, there is adequate, more than adequate, ample supply in the region to meet Cascade's needs as well as the rest of the regions. The other thing to keep in mind is that Cascade has its own sufficient supply through 2040 and actually even beyond. And what does that mean? So Cascade's current contracts provide for 41.3 MGDs until 2040, and then they gradually decrease. Cascade purchased 33 million gallons a day from Seattle and another 8 from Tacoma. And this was based, like I said, on previous demand forecasts, which were high. Everything said we need to secure this level of supply. But as we're seeing, the world has shifted significantly, and the demand has gone down and down and down, despite unprecedented growth in the region. And Cascade's own demands have flattened over the they were going down and they've flattened over the last decade. Right now, Cascade is using about 2/3 or 65%, 27 MGDs of the total purchased water that we have from Seattle and Tacoma. So of the Seattle contract, it's about 80%. So both of these contracts are take or pay, but we are only using 27 MGDs as a region, as Cascade members. The total usage is 27 MGDs. So Cascade has sufficient supply through at least 2040 and maybe longer. Bottom line, what Cascade would like to do is establish a water supply development fund, and we think that that is premature. All of our analysis is showing that it is premature, and it's premature for several reasons. Based on all the regional forecasts, including Cascade's own, there is ample regional supply, and it may not be necessary to ever develop lake taps as a drinking water source. And we reviewed Cascade's proposal, and we have several observations. One is that there is regional water suppliers that are projecting ample supply into the future, even with anticipated future growth. in population and climate change. The need for lake taps is uncertain, that if and when we might ever need to develop lake taps as a water source. The other thing is that there is no downside to delaying establishment of the Water Supply Development Fund until contract negotiations are complete, which should take roughly, it should be done within the next couple of years. There is no urgency in establishing this fund. In this next 2-year window, Cascade is planning to raise rates, $300,000 in rate increases in the next 2 years to go towards this fund. That is, given the magnitude of the project costs and the time period before lake taps may need to be developed, this is a small amount of shortfall that can be easily made up in the next 2 to 3 decades. So it avoids setting aside unnecessary, unneeded and restricted funds. And so one thing I will say is that although Cascade is not planning to do significant rate increases in the next 2 years, they are planning to do a couple of things. One is they're planning to transfer $5 million of reserves this year into this fund, and another $6.7 million next year. And these reserves will no longer be available. Once they're put into the Water Supply Development Fund, they are then for the purpose of developing lake taps, and they will not be available to pay for Cascade's operating or capital costs, nor are they available to pay down debt that Cascade currently has. In addition to this roughly $12 million that Cascade plans to transfer to the Water Supply Fund immediately, they will be doing rate increases that will generate another $6.7 million from Bellevue customers in the next 8 years. So while there is no urgency, and one might think, well, there is no downside because we're only paying $300,000 in rate increases. There is actually, there are a lot of things embedded in setting up this reserve and dedicating funds that could be used otherwise. And just outside this 2-year window, there are very significant increases to Bellevue and the rest of the Cascade members, but primarily because the impact will be felt most by Bellevue because we pay roughly half of Cascade's costs. The other thing to keep in mind is that current ratepayers are already paying 2 cost items. One is they're already paying roughly $8 million a year in debt service in their current rates. And this debt will be paid off in 2038. They are also paying for water supply from Seattle. And that, if Lake Taps is eventually developed, that is another source of funding that becomes available. Another issue to keep in mind is what happens to these reserves if Lake Taps is never developed. By 2055, the reserve balance will be roughly $1.2 billion. Bellevue customers will pay roughly half of that, around $600 million. What happens to that money that is paid into this fund? That will not be a decision that Bellevue gets to decide. Bellevue does not have control over these funds. So what's staff's recommendation? In order to ensure the best value for Bellevue ratepayers, we are recommending that Cascade explore all alternatives, including negotiating a longer-term contract on the order of 30 years or more with Seattle, Tacoma, or even Everett before deciding to develop Lake Taps. The other recommendation we have is that do not establish the Water Supply Development Fund until contract negotiations are complete, and which should take, like I said, roughly 2 years. And what I would say is there's no urgency in setting up this fund. The $289,000 that in new revenues that's being generated in next 3 years, this is nothing when you're talking about a multi-billion-dollar project. and you have 2 to 3 decades to accumulate reserves if they're needed. So our thing is that there is no hurry, but the downside to establishing that supply fund right now is that there will be, the fund is established, and Cascade's plan is to immediately start transferring very significant amounts. Like I said, in the range of $12 million, $5 million this year, 6.7 million next year. And then once this supply fund is established, while 2 years, the rate increases aren't that significant. Right outside that window, they will be, because like I said, between 2023 and 2029, Bellevue ratepayers will pay $6.7 million, additional $6.7 million into this fund. So that is really our analysis. So this is just a recap of what Cascade is pursuing. These are the 3 options that they're pursuing. And what we are recommending, an alternate we are proposing, is this one, detailed in red, which is explore everything before developing lake tabs. And also, it is really too early and detrimental to Bellevue ratepayers to establish and fund a water supply development fund at this time. So with that, I am happy to take any questions you have.
Okay, thank you. So we'll start with Councilmember Stokes, then Councilmember Lee, Zahn, Robertson, myself, Deputy Mayor, and Councilmember Barksdale. Councilmember Stokes, you are the liaison, the representative for the City of Bellevue to Cascade Water Alliance, and I think Councilmember Lee is the alternate. Am I right?
Correct.
Okay, can you start us off, please?
Yeah, I'm just trying to think what, I don't want to waste time. I feel sandbagged at this point. I appreciate the presentation. It would have been nice as a courtesy to have that access to that before. There are a number of comments that have been made that are not accurate. One of which is that Bellevue doesn't have control over this. That's not the way Cascade works, and but that's a long piece to talk about that. The 2 years, well, there was a lot of things said that were completely, that there are a lot of things to unpack that were designed to put a negative spin on the whole lake taps piece. And I don't have any problem with, well, and the other factor, the thing that is incorrect is that, well, 2 things. One is that Cascade is, has planned and will conduct conversations with Seattle and Tacoma about going forward. And the reason that we haven't done that is not Cascade's doing, but Seattle's in some of their concern, their things they're doing themselves. And so that's never been a question. And the issue is not an either or. It's clear if the material is read that this is a long-term project. And planning out of Seattle, if we can negotiate, Cascade can negotiate a good agreement with Seattle, which we pay both for the cost for the water itself and for a tremendous infrastructure. Talking about pipes from places, you're coming from, you know, a long way. So we're paying for that. And we would not be paying, in fact, ratepayers would not be paying for the water itself. It would be different with the lake taps, but the factor is that this is a long-term project, and what this has come down to, this conversation, despite all these other things, some of which are essentially riddled with some exaggeration or things that aren't quite. There's another viewpoint or side to it. It was clearly laid out several times, and this has been talked about since for several years. In fact, it was part of the original planning that was done 20 years ago, and Bellevue has always been a leader in this. Bellevue has a vote that would negate any other. I mean, Bellevue has basically control. So to say it doesn't have control is not accurate. But it is a regional piece, and we work with the other cities, and it's been very successful and highly successful. This is Chuck Mosier, Grant Dedinger, and Don Davidson did a tremendous amount to get Cascade going and make it successful. Lloyd Warren, he was the utilities person at the time, and he's now still with the Sammamish Water Plateau. This Lake Tapps has always been planned for a long time in the future. There are things to unpack on the climate piece that are, there are some statements been made that somewhat, I would agree with, but there's some that are spinning it a different way. And it's clear that the current climate change is there, and that's something that we're looking at. And it's also clearly been set forth all the time. We in any conversation in the meetings, which has been attended by staff, all the meetings are attended by the alternate and consultants, and everything has been done in the open on this whole piece, so there's not anything secret. And it's always been the idea that we may not ever develop Lake Tapps, but it is an asset. And we also think that looking, and this is hard for people to do, but looking 50, 60 years down the line is a very prudent thing to do in the long run. And if we can continue to get water at a good rate from Seattle, and there are a lot of issues about why, and that's a whole long story, we'll do that, or other resources. But having this option down the line is a very wise thing to do. The rate, one of the reasons for starting this at this time and putting money into it, even if it's a small amount at the beginning, and I would have, we'd have to bring, and we need to make a decision on this, to bring in the consultants and the financial people and business people. This is a business decision, and bring them in to have us understand why putting money in now is cost effective in the long run, and not putting money in now will cost ratepayers in the future a lot more and cost us a lot more. It's just a sound business and financial determination. It's all based on consultation and work with very highly regarded people in the financial fields, engineering fields, and all this. This is not just somebody making this stuff up. And if you want to, wait to establish the fund until the contract negotiations are complete, that's irrelevant. We're not the contract. If we have or don't have a contract with Seattle, it's not next year. It's in 40 or after that. There's no relevance or rationale to saying we'll wait to establish till after the contract negotiations are complete, because that doesn't has anything to do with us deciding to use or develop Lake Tapps or not. it's a distractive commentary, but it's not anything tied to the reality of what the project is.
So Councilmember
are
Stokes,
working with
can you tell us what your recommendation is?
My recommendation is that we, along with Kirkland, Redmond, all the other Cascade members, and I've talked to individuals this afternoon, and we're working on something that's been in play a long time. And my recommendation is that we join the other members in this. One of the things that's been said is there was no way for us to know what was going on or whatever. We have had and it's clearly explained to people that the plan is every 2 years to have a review of this and see how it's going. You know, if you want to set up and have a review in a year after we first start on this, that would be fine. But my recommendation is that we agree to establish the fund and move forward. And that basically is what the utilities is saying.
So you're saying that you're proposing that Cascade establish the Water Supply Development Fund as proposed?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That's your recommendation.
That's my recommendation.
Okay.
I'm a little concerned about, I think if we want to have a really good, balanced informational background for us to make this decision, I would also like to have, I'd like to have some Cascade and perhaps some other people come in and talk about the reality of what this is, as opposed to some of the, it's just not really balanced to have all of this stuff laid out like this and then not have it validated.
Okay, well, let's move on to the next council member. Thank you for your thoughts and for your recommendation. I can come back to you after we go through if you'd like. Councilmember Lee.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. You know, this is kind of new for me, even though I've been on the council for a long time. You know, this is a long-term project, You know, it takes a lot of understanding and expertise and follow through. So it's very complex. It's as John mentioned, it's a 40, 50 year. Some people actually mention it's a 100-year project. That's what I hear from the Cascade, you know, the Water Alliance discussion. And I can say one thing, you know, even with my limited exposure to this, especially during the pandemic, you know, it's very challenging, difficult to really get involved, except just being there. You know, we have very strict, you know, protocols, and you know, I'm alternate, so I just basically listen and you know, be able to help, and if there's anything that I can add and advise, so on. And my observation is that the Cascade Water Alliance staff is doing a great job. They're wonderful staff, and the people they are working with are very good people. You know, they're good consultants, and they make good recommendations. They follow a lot of Bellevue Utilities principles, you know, how to manage the financial management. So we are very, there's a good, I think, good communication between the Cascade Water Alliance and Bellevue staff. So I don't take it, I have no fault with what, you know, they have been doing, and the quality is good. I was very impressed with the financial consultant, which they have mostly done all the work, the forecast, and come up with a good financial management. I think as John mentioned, they try to manage it, try to make sure that they make good business decisions. The information they provide, you know, to the board members, And so based on all those things, I think, I believe that they've done the best they can then do, and it's appropriate. Until, when the staff, our staff, was given us to come up with the response information that the council requested when Cascade Water Alliance, pre-briefed us. That's another good thing they did. I think they briefed every city in whatever they're doing regarding the Water System Development Fund.
Councilmember Lee,
yeah.
It would be really helpful if you could either come up with a recommendation or comment if you support what NOV has proposed or what Councilmember Stokes has proposed.
That needs to be.
You can
say yes or no, okay? But that's not what people are waiting.
I'm just telling you the ultimate goal is
I know.
I'd
I
like
will
to hear
come
that.
up with that. I will come up with that. I'll come up with that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Because you need to provide some background. Otherwise, why do we even meet to say yes, no? Well, that's it. No. This is a very complex matter, as we know.
I'll give you another minute to come to that point, please, and then I can come back to you.
Okay, we come back. But the point is that this, I just want to get right to it. If that's the case, if you want to cut to chase, the decision was made, somewhere like 20 years ago. It's a different condition, different time. We know that the water supply forecast every says we're going to run out of water, and our demand is going to increase, growth, everything. And so we are at the hostage of Seattle selling us water. So we need to have a water source, sub-independent source. We all agree. I was on the council then. No question about it. That's the best decision we made. No question about it. And pursuing that, we're doing all the right things. We have good people in front of us running it, talking about it. We're making the right decisions. But listening to our staff presentation, looking at the new forecast, looking at what Cascade Water Alliance has presented, it's nothing to do with the staff or what decision that's being made by how to manage this building of the water supply. It's really question based on current situation, based on future prediction, based on the new environment. We have lots of water. It's proven to be. So I just want to mention that. We have to ask ourselves now, do we need to have a water supply system? If the answer is yes, we are doing the right thing, the Cascade Water Alliance. If the answer is no, well, we have to listen to our own city staff and see what we need to do. That is the big difference. I think that's the ultimate decision. So it's a decision we have to make collectively, Bellevue council members. Today, do we need it? Do we need it? There's so many questions asked. Another reason why we did this is an insurance program for us. Okay, do we need this insurance? That depends on the condition. Right now, there's plenty of water. Maybe we don't need insurance, okay? And the staff also mentioned there's all uncertainty. So it's really weighing the cost and the certainty and uncertainty and what we're looking at. That's
so what's your recommendation?
Need to decide.
I haven't understood what your recommendation
based on what I've heard today, okay? I haven't heard anything from Cascade Alliance regarding the kind of conversation we need to have. I would, based on what staff presented to me, that to us today, I would say, hey, my answer is we probably do not need. It's future. We cannot predict the future. But today, looking forward to the next 20 years, 30 years, we probably do not need to have our own water resource because there's plenty of water out there and people are willing to sell to us. They want to sell, they want to make money. Otherwise, we'll be sitting on the ground doing nothing. So if we can have that guarantee in contract, that would be a guarantee for the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years.
So you support staff recommendation?
Based on what I've got today, yes.
Okay. All right. Let's move on to Councilmember Zahn.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. It's interesting as I've been listening to the previous presentation and then this one, I think about the genesis of this is all about how we make sure that we provide long-term water supply for our community. And it seems to me as I'm listening, there's a fundamental key questions, right? Will developing lake taps be required? What's the probability that we're going to have successful negotiation of a cost-effective rate and terms over the next 20, 30 years? And then ultimately this question of, do we need to establish this fund now or wait in terms of managing risk? What we heard last time from Cascade was that if we believe fundamentally that we're going to need to develop lake taps, that instead of the way we avoid having a spike in the water rates for our community is to have this gradual having a fund, and that initial collection of money would be pretty low. And then as we look at the actual date in the future, that then we ramp up the collection of the rates. The part that is new in this conversation is about the amount of money that would be transferred from reserves, which makes me wonder what are the feedback from the other Cascade members? So if we are from Bellevue recommending another option, has that option been provided to Cascade and Cascade members? And do we have some feedback from that? Or I'm trying to understand what we're doing here. We are voting whether we're going to align with the other Cascade members, or if we are going to vote for something different that the others have already voted to support. So I think I'm really just trying to understand, one, feedback about this concept with other Cascade members, and then two, what's the urgency of the timing, and is there time to work with Cascade and the other members to vet this as a separate, another option, because we're in this together as a regional Cascade with multiple cities and as members.
Nav, can
So
you
that's-
answer Councilmember Zahn's
So
questions?
I think, so you have two questions. One is, what's the feedback from other members? And my understanding is that the reason that you are here, you heard September 27th presentation from Cascade, is that one or two board members realized that this was a very significant decision that the board was making. And they said, we need to take this back to our councils, and we need to have them weigh in on this decision. And otherwise, this would be a board Cascade board decision. It would not be coming to you. So Cascade board presented this to everybody, all the different other jurisdictions before coming to Bellevue. And I sat in on the Sammamish presentation as a commissioner there. And what I can tell you is that on the surface, there's nothing fundamentally different that they presented to Bellevue than they did to other members. I think the difference is that we are fiscally conservative. We are long-range planners. We also are good stewards of, city of Bellevue, and what our motivation is, what our why we're here. And so for me, we dug a lot into the surface, and that is where all this information that we are sharing with you, and it's real, and we have shared all this with Cascade staff beforehand. So it should not come as a surprise to any of you, and definitely not to Cascade board members or to Cascade staff, because we have shared our reservations about this path. And so why the other jurisdictions have chosen to say, oh, okay, this is a good idea, I think is, I can only speculate. What I can tell you is that they have not done the level of analysis that Bellevue staff has done. And Bellevue staff does this analysis because we know that half of that money is going to come from Bellevue. That's why we do this analysis on your behalf.
Okay, so maybe I don't think my question has actually still been answered, Nav. My question is, we're in it together with other Cascade members. If we are offering a slightly different option that we're voting on as our own council members, have we actually brought this to the other Cascade City members so that they are, and as a potential option? Because I feel like bringing it only here, I'm not sure that we are affording our other cities who may not actually, who may find the way that you've characterized them to not be how they would characterize themselves. And so I'm just trying to understand, as we look at this option that staff is recommending to us, whether it's actually something that the other cities are also going to be considering or not, because we're the largest city, which means we have more resources and more staff to dig in and understand. And part of being a good neighbor regionally is to share that knowledge and analysis if we've done more of that deep work. So I'm just trying to understand that part of it. And then the timing for voting now, because I frankly was surprised that this went from an informational only into a vote. So that's
Nav, let me just put some things in here. I know that Issaquah has not voted yet. Their council has not voted. I don't think Redmond has either. But you're basically voting for Councilmember Stokes to represent an opinion to bring to the Cascade board on the 17th, I believe, of November is when they're planning to take their vote. And that would be, so the councils are going to vote, and then the representatives will go back to the board on the 17th and take a vote. So go ahead, Nav.
I think I would like to respond to Councilmember Zahn's question about, have we reached out to other jurisdictions? And I think perhaps there is some confusion about the structure of Cascade and how it functions and the role of staff versus the role of the electeds. So there are various committees that our staff attend meetings. There are generally electeds in those meetings, and electeds obviously have a different role. And there are staff from other jurisdictions. And so when we share our concerns with Cascade, they are also being shared with everybody. Did we reach out to Issaquah or to Redmond and say, hey, this is our concern? No, we did not. We shared our concerns in a very open and transparent way with Cascade staff and everybody that was in those meetings. So this is not, we've given you more information, but the gist of it is that these two things, these are concerns we've shared, and we are particularly concerned about setting aside a large reserve at this time when in 2 years we might have a little bit more certainty. So we're not talking about delaying this decision for 20 years or 40 years. And the other thing is, which is just an aside, is we actually already have contract with Seattle that assures us water through 2040. So this is a contract negotiation extension beyond 2040. And our current contract has assurance for us for more than adequate water for our needs to 2040 and actually around 2045, given what our forecast is for the region. So no, we have not reached out to any other member staff, and nor would it be appropriate for us to do that, I think.
Okay, so that was really my question, maybe one of process, and it sounds like Councilmember Stokes may also be a little surprised at some of the information that was presented here. So thank you.
Councilmember Robertson.
Thank you. So I remember when I was a pretty new council member, Chuck Clark, who used to be the executive director of Cascade, came and gave a presentation to the council, and he talked about the projected, sorry, it's getting late, the projected numbers as far as the forecast of what amount of water was be needed, and then the actual. And he said, No matter what we do, no matter how much we lower our forecast, it's always wrong. It's always too high. And the reason for that is that even though we're a growing area, we are using water much more effectively, whether it's from irrigation, where people are using drip irrigation versus just the widespread sprinkler, whether it's the conversion of low flow toilets, the lower water use, I can't even talk anymore. The the dishwasher or the washer and dryer, washer, etc. We're using less water per capita, and so the amount of supply being well above what the forecasted demand is not a surprise. In fact, if you look at how much water we're buying under our contracts with Tacoma and Seattle, I remember we had a presentation a couple of years ago about we're paying for all this extra water that we're not using. So that is one of the drivers of our rates, where if we actually had it just be paying for the water that we're using, it would be a lot less. And now we're talking about adding another supply online with that we probably don't need. And I'm not, I think that the staff recommendation is really wise, because it's not saying axe it, it's saying continue to study it, but also look at this fourth option of extended contracts with Tacoma or Seattle, and don't start moving money now. I think that that's a really smart approach. And I know that we, and I think that we are very lucky and well served by our utility director and utility department, because as Councilmember Stokes said, it's a business decision. We have a utility department that can analyze the heck out of what's a good or wise business decision. And their proposal or recommendation, I think, is the epitome of what is a good or wise business decision. I know that the other cities may not have voted yet. I do think it wouldn't be bad for us to reach out and let people know what the council votes tonight, if the council does in fact vote to add this fourth option and to delay the moving of money and the starting to charge for this water development fund. Because we do have the staff, and Bellevue's in a leadership position here. We have 50% of the costs. I think we have veto authority, and people are going to be looking to what does Bellevue think about this, because they know this council really thinks hard. We have great staff that can inform us what's a smart decision. So I think that tonight we have the opportunity to lead on this issue and make a smart decision. To me, that means listening to the staff and making it so that we're not taking anything off the table, which I think is very wise. We're adding something to the table, as well as delaying by 2 years, which in the time of a 40-year project is nothing, to start moving money and raising rates with regard to the Water Development Fund. To me, that's wise. I think that we should do that. And I had something else to say, but it's gone from my mind. But I really do appreciate the work that Councilmember Stokes and Councilmember Lee are doing on this. And I do think that this is the way to go. I was going to say, people, the biggest complaint I see from people is how high Bellevue's water rates are. And I am always defending the fact that we are so smart and forward looking, and we buy the water from Cascade, and that we are always building. We don't have our own water supply, et cetera, et cetera. And that's why our rates are what they are. So if we are doing something that results in higher rates and it's unnecessary, I think that really is not the way to go. And I don't think that honors our fiduciary duty to our ratepayers to be forward-looking and planning so that the rates don't have a huge spike later, but also not taking things on that drive rates unnecessarily. And this may be necessary, but we don't know yet. So let's give it the 2 years to negotiate and see. I think that that's a very, very reasonable approach. So thanks.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go ahead, and then Deputy Mayor and Councilmember Barksdale. So ever since I've been on the council, I too have heard from our residents, why are we paying so much for water that we never use? And we have been paying a lot of money for water on the off chance that we're going to need to use more than we've ever had to use. And we've been lucky. We haven't had to use more, but the extra money that we paid so that we could access that water, I mean, where has that gone? And I just wonder, has it gone into some kind of a reserve account or something? I'd be curious to know more about that. I'm really concerned about entering into a similar situation where, again, we're paying more than for water that we're not going to need. But I also see the impact of climate change. And I can foresee that we might have less water to work with. And maybe it's really important to have the opportunity to derive water from a different source down the road. So I guess, I'd be really interested in looking at a little more control over the rates increase after 2 years. Like, let's go forward, but in 2 years' time, when we reassess and have a better idea of these other contracts and what the actual usage is versus the projected, I'd like to have the opportunity for a complete renew vote and re-examination of where we're going, and not just, if we agreed to it today, then we're just going down that path and we can't get off if we find that we don't need to be on it. So I don't know, Nav, how much flexibility do we have? Or how much flexibility can we build into the recommendation?
I think once a reserve is set up, it's a cascade decision, and once it's already transfers are made as of that latter part of this year, $5 million and another 6.7 to next year. I think then to undo it will be very problematic. I think I could not advise you on what would be the flexibility for Bellevue to undo something that Cascade Board has adopted and implemented. I think that's why this decision came to you before they do it.
And then what about the funds that we paid that for the water we never used? Where has that money gone?
It's a contract that is a take or pay contract. So the contract that Cascade signed with the Seattle and with Tacoma was for a guarantee of this much water, and you can use as much of that as you want. But here's the bill. So that's why our costs are fixed basically from Cascade, is because there is the total cost, and we have an X percentage of that, regardless of what our actual usage might be. It's just as a percent of the total. And that percent is based on what percentage Bellevue uses as a part of the entire system. But as you saw in the earlier slide, the Seattle contract is only 43 cents of every dollar that Cascade collects.
Okay, Deputy Mayor, sorry.
Thank you, Mayor. First, Nav, thank you so much for the analysis. I know you and your team and Lucy and others put a lot of effort into this. I appreciate it. And I know that all council members were given the opportunity to get a briefing here. So really appreciate the information and really looking out for Bellevue in this scenario. I was reading actually an old press release that showed when the purchase happened back in 2005, the original goal was to have Lake Tapps up and running by 2025. I mean, 4 years from now, generating about 65 million gallons per day. This is an interesting decision for us, just because, on one hand, I like the fact that Cascade is kind of taking a similar approach. And Nav, I think you might even agree that, the sooner we start this fund, we can hopefully limit the spikes that we have in terms of building up that fund to eventually pay for the development of lake taps. However, what I keep going back to is just there's a lot of capacity right now in the region. Demand is less than half of that regional supply. And again, we've owned, or Cascade, as part of Cascade, we've owned lake taps since 2005. But there's no, at least from my perspective, there doesn't seem to be the urgency like there is now. During a pandemic, during a time that, as my colleagues have expressed, we've heard from so many residents that have a lot of concern already about the very high rates in Bellevue, and this will add on to it. And I tried to get some data in terms of how much of an increase the ratepayers in Bellevue could expect. But certainly, given the price tag of this project, I think, that increase would be, fairly substantial. I think any increase would be somewhat difficult for our ratepayers to, continue to pay. So, that is a concern. So, for me, I really don't really see the whole downside to waiting 2 years after those contracts are fully negotiated and we get the best price, they get the best deal between Seattle versus Tacoma. And actually, one question I had for you, Nav, or perhaps Councilmember Stokes can answer, why Everett was taken out of that equation. It seemed like options 2, 3, and 4 on, I believe it was on slide 7, Nav, had negotiations with Seattle and Tacoma, but I don't know why Everett was taken out of, maybe there's a good reason for that, I don't know, but why Everett was taken out of the negotiation process with those other cities. But again, for me, Mayor, where I'm kind of landing on this, I don't really see a downside with waiting a little bit longer, since we have waited this long since 2005 already, to make sure that we do negotiate the best possible deal. Once we do, and we are agreed to start that fund, and we do see a clear reason to develop lake taps due to climate change and other reasons, then yeah, we should establish that as quickly as possible. But that's kind of where I'm landing on right now. But Nav, if you can answer that one question, I would appreciate why Everett was kind of left out of the mix as far as what Cascade was pursuing.
So to the best of our understanding, the reason Everett was not evaluated further, the cost implications, is Everett is up north, so there would need to be a new pipe, new connection from Clearview to Woodinville. And if the basic premise is, which was you'll see that in this here, in all options except number 6, the underlying assumption is that lake taps will be developed. So if lake taps will be developed, then if you have invested in infrastructure up north, a pipe that you're going to pay for, then that will become a stranded asset if you don't use it. However, what I would say is, what is the best redundancy if you were to actually explore that? Because we live in an earthquake zone. And right now, good, bad, or indifferent, Seattle has 2 very separate connections to provide water to Bellevue. Once we develop lake taps, that is our source. And so just the redundancy in itself, if you're talking about, where do you want to invest your money? That may be, but that is not the way Cascade or the board evaluated it. They said we will be developing lake taps in 2059, and then this asset that we will pay for will become a stranded asset. I think that is the reason that wasn't evaluated any further.
Gotcha, understood. Thanks, Nav.
Yeah. Councilmember Barksdale.
Great, thank you, Mayor. I have one question going into this. Do you have, Nav, when does the measurement happen? I mean, right? Because I mean, we deal with seasonality, and so I imagine the aggregate supply and demand changes over the year. Can you?
This is an annual supply. So this is the demand is also, for example, let me go to that slide. Oops, maybe it is in this direction. Oh, sorry. Give me a second. Okay, I'm lost in my own presentation.
Charmaine, can you help out on the?
No.
Okay.
Hey. Oops. Right here. So
I'm not seeing your slide. Is it just me?
Oh, okay. Let me.
No one's seen it. Charmaine, if you could.
Here we go. Sorry, I stopped sharing. Can you see it now?
I see that you're sharing. Yes, we see.
Okay. So these are annual. They're not seasonal. So this is the annual demand and annual. So every utility determines how much they're going to produce. And so this 425 million gallons a day, that is their annual aggregate supply for each one, for the total of the region. This here, the black line, is actual usage each year. So in 2020, it is 200. That is the sum of all the regional usage. So seasonality doesn't play into this.
Okay, I see. Got it. So I guess one question I had, kind of building on the mayor's question about flexibility, if the intention, as has come up before, is to smooth out the impact to ratepayers by starting to collect sooner, and it seems the issue is that once it's in the hands of Cascade, that we don't have control over it. Is there flexibility in, say, having our own fund and then feeding into Cascades if we determine there's a need, thus continuing to keep that smooth impact on ratepayers, but still contribute if we determine there's a need there and we can't negotiate?
I assure you that we can find $289,000 which is what the would be the 289. Most of it would be, I guess, Bellevue's share. If at the end of 2 years, we need to make up that money. So what I would say is where you're going, Councilmember Barksdale, is actually a very thought process, which is if whenever Lake Tapps is developed, if we are saying we want to mitigate we want to avoid rate spikes, which has always been my principle. You know that. I mean, smooth rates are a core financial position of ours and policy. If at some point it's determined that Lake Tapps does need to be developed, whether it's 40 years from now or 60 years or 100 years, we will then I would say yes, we should do a rate increase and keep the reserves in Bellevue's books. And at the time that we need to pay it, the money is there. But you control that money while it's in Bellevue, just like you do the R&R reserve, for instance. So I think that to me, that would, I'm not even there yet because I believe very strongly that it's premature to be setting up any kind of reserve at this point or doing any kind of rate increases. So I would not suggest that, oh, let's do a rate increase and then put the money in Bellevue's hands right now. No, I'm saying it's not needed. It's not needed at this time. And 2 years is a very short time frame when you're talking about $2.5 to $3 billion project and way out in the future. So I would tell you that Bellevue doesn't need to do a rate increase for those 2 years. But the principle of keeping the reserves in Bellevue rather than Cascade controls it, that is a principle that at some point, if we need to have this fund, I will come back to you and I would pose that to you actually as an option that you should consider.
And would that include like a hard 2-year reevaluation?
sorry.
I'm asking
What I'm saying,
Councilmember Barksdale if your proposal of holding out contributing funds for 2 years would include a 2-year reevaluation, at which time we would determine whether we want to financially join in and we would make up the lost revenues that we had not contributed at that time.
oh,
Yes.
let me just sort of add one. If a fund is established, the roughly 12 million that's going into the fund is also roughly half of it, maybe even more, because of the level of development we've had in Bellevue. It has come from Bellevue. So the 300,000 is a drop in the bucket, unintended. So
okay.
I think a hard evaluation on whether we should pay that money now or in 2 years is really not the question before you. The question is, because in essence, Cascade establishes the fund, they use $12 million that has been collected, half of it's been collected from Bellevue, and we say, no, we don't want to be part of that fund.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, let's Councilmember Barksdale, are you done?
I am, thank you.
I'll come back to you. Councilmember Stokes, would you like to continue?
Yeah. That this last conversation is interesting. I think I mean there's a number of questions about that, and I don't think we need to really get into that. The difficulty of and this has been brought up before, the difficulty of having the city collect the money but earmark it for this just doesn't work as I understand it, and I'd like to get some actual experts from the financial field to talk about this. And I'm not sure we want to have the money sitting around. There are just some real legal and financial questions about that and the validity and whether it actually even works with particularly in a way that is the most cost effective going forward. So that's another issue to look at. You know, I don't think I hope we're not going to be making, well, I just don't think we're at a point where I'm not comfortable with making a decision on this at this point, because I think there are, I don't think we have all the facts that I think we're looking at. It's like we've been shifted to look at a certain way when that's not the question really being asked. You know, the only I guess downside of waiting the 2 years is that, and then if we go forward on it, ratepayers in the future will pay more because it is clearly a financial, as has been presented, no one has has said that that's not accurate, that it will cost more. It's just, it's the way things work when you make these investments. If we're willing to take that risk and don't worry about it in the future, fine. And I mean, it's just hard to unpack all of these things when the decision is when I'm just not sure we even get a good picture. And I thought the deputy mayor's kind of comments about it were a little more balanced and to the point of some of this. If we don't feel comfortable of doing it in the next 2 years, particularly doing it and not really knowing what the rationale is, other than we just don't want to do it, and we don't care if it really may have a dilatory effect on ratepayers in the future, the rest of that money is, and there keeps coming up these little things that are hard to unpack because we just hear one assumption of it as opposed to a reality. and just makes it difficult. I would like to get, we're not going to vote on it at the council, at the Cascade, tomorrow. There's been a lot of information brought up here that I think is, we need to kind of, I would like to unpack. And I again say, I would have, just from my standpoint of, as a council member and as the liaison and chair of the Cascade Alliance, I'd like to have had the information and the ability to respond to some of these things. And I pointed out several things already that are not accurate or a little bit off base on this. And
well, Councilmember Stokes, you've been very helpful in your summary here, because I think there are those who are not ready to vote and would like to process some of the information. We have a proposal from Councilmember Barksdale, and I think it would also be helpful to see what other cities' conversations are.
Right.
So I guess going, as I call on the other council members, if you could let me know either A, you're ready to vote tonight and what you're ready to vote on, or B, what questions you would like answered before we regroup next week, because we have time to come back next week and have a discussion if we have room on our agenda, Mr. Miyake. I know where that really our agendas are very packed, but I don't think we may not have a majority of people who are ready to vote tonight. That just may be our situation. So Councilmember Lee, how about you?
I'm ready to vote.
Okay.
Yeah, just add a couple of things. We 20-some years ago, the council, Bellevue, decided to have this project as an insurance to ensure lower rate, in the future. Okay, that's based on that particular circumstance, particular forecast. And I heard, the benefit of listening to Cascade Water Line staff, and they made good analysis. They have good forecasts. The forecast that our staff is using is based on their forecasts, but it's all based on premises that we need to have water resource. We need to use it as insurance. It all worked. It was a good decision, as I said, but things have changed. Now we don't need this as a insurance anymore. We don't need it as to guarantee a lower rate. In fact, based on what our staff now and the capable staff has shown, the having a water resource now has more uncertainty, has more complex situations. There's a lot of scenarios she described. I don't need to go over that one more time. We've heard, the complications. Number one, to just highlight one, the other water is already there, proven. We have developed a water resource with a lot of challenges, a lot of hurdles in the middle. Just with the limited time I have on the Cascade, I know how complicated it can be. We're talking about, like the mayor said, climate, but the forecast has climate already built in, considered, because Cascade Water has great staff. They do all that. It's not just any forecast they throw in there. So it's very thorough. I think Cascade board members are responsible. They ask those tough questions. But based on the questions, the answers, what the Cascade board member has looked into, it's shown that there's a lot of uncertainties. And after all these 40 years or 30 years on, we build our plant, build our water resource, we don't know what the cost is going to be. Just treatment plant itself, we know how treatment plant can cost. So, King County wastewater treatment plant, bright water, we're talking about a new one. It's billions of dollars. We don't know. And talk about, all these things that not indicated. But we know one thing for sure. If we can negotiate a contract with Tacoma, with Seattle, with Everett, or maybe all three of them, we know we have a price that's going to guarantee as long as we want to. That's prescribed by the contract. If anything changes in the meantime, we still have lake tap. We still can do all those things we wanted to do. We still have an asset we control. Doesn't mean that suddenly disappeared. It's still there. So the time
you are ready
right
to
now.
you're ready to vote
so
for
we're
the
elected to make the decisions, not the staff. So do we need one? And my sense is that based on all the current information I've seen, I haven't heard anything from Cascade Water Alliance. I would love to. That's fine. I don't mind doing that. I'm open-minded. But based on what I've heard, okay, we are ready to make that decision.
You are ready
to
make a decision to vote for staff recommendation.
Yes.
Okay.
Don't kick the can down the road.
Thank you. Okay. Councilmember Zahn.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. You know, I appreciate listening to all of my colleagues as well as Nav providing the information. And my sense is that we are part of the Cascade Water Alliance as an alliance with other cities. And I think that the knowledge and the analysis that you have done from the staff standpoint should be something that we share with Cascade and the other members. What I would be interested in getting my colleagues to perhaps support would be taking the staff recommendation and bringing it back to Cascade as one where we'd like our other Cascade board members to consider this as an alternative so that there is the alternative from the current Cascade version and then this one here, that instead of saying we're just voting on something completely different than what our other cities are doing, that we're actually providing this as a choice for them. And hopefully they join us because we're the largest city in the Cascade Water Alliance. So that's how I would view this.
I love that idea. Okay, I hear you. Thank you. Councilmember Robertson.
Thank you. I agree that we should be sharing this information with our partners who are also members of Cascade. I think that that's good. More collaboration is better. I am ready to vote tonight, and if we vote with the staff recommendation, I hope that we will share the information with our other partners. And the reason I'm ready to vote tonight is one, I just looked ahead at the council agenda for next week, and I think it's too full already. So I don't think we have space to deal with this. We also, if we make a decision tonight, it'll give us, almost 10 days to share information with other members of Cascade, which we won't have if we delay a week. And the reason I support the staff's recommendation is I'm thinking about it. What's the risk? If we support staff's recommendation and add a fourth thing to consider and a 2-year wait on starting the fund, what's the risk? Almost nothing. Maybe 300,000 that we would have to come up with some other way over the course of 40 years. If we don't wait and they go ahead and start collecting and they don't study doing the bigger contract, what's the risk? Well, first, $13 million of reserves is going to get moved out of general reserves and be put into this reserve, therefore not available for other potential needs. We definitely will have the increase in rates from this, even if we decide later on that it's not a good deal to create a new water source at Lake Tapps. We also will lose options. And to me, that by going with staff recommendation, we keep more options on the table, which can be looked at for the financial well-being, the long-term planning, and the good interests of the ratepayers. So I'm ready to go. I'm ready to support staff's recommendation tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. And me. I'm not sure if I'm ready to weigh in yet. I'm going to come back to myself. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. And just to be clear, I want to go back to something that Nav said. Nav, you did share this analysis with Cascade, correct? And based on that, that would have been shared with the liaisons to other municipalities as well. That was shared with Cascade. Is that correct or is that incorrect? Am I assuming too much?
So the way we raise, so staff does not have official authority over any. So what we do is we attend meetings, we present our counter argument to something. To our electeds, Councilmember Stokes and Councilmember Lee, we give them annotated agendas, and that is where we present our arguments for supporting something or not supporting something. And then we offer to do briefings. And so these are the mechanisms that we have in place that do we have the authority, and we have exercised every one of those, or at least offered every one of those mechanisms. Have we shared this? I did not call Redmond or Issaquah or anybody say, yeah, but in those meetings and to our recommendation is not news to anybody.
Okay, that's the bottom line. That's what I was curious about. Okay, so yeah, I think I'm in line. You know, if you know, our liaison, Councilmember Stokes, feels that there is additional information that is very pertinent to this vote, you know, I think we should give him the flexibility to do that. But if we're going to vote tonight, and I'm happy to do that, then I would be voting for the staff recommendation based on that information and based on the analysis or the argument that I provided earlier, and then as well as what Councilmember Robertson said, that you know, waiting 2 years, we can easily make up what we didn't pay into that fund, and I don't think much would really change for us to you know, restart our participation in that fund. So so happy to vote tonight.
Thank you, Councilmember Barksdale.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm happy with waiting and giving Councilmember Stokes the time he needs as a liaison. So I think that's important for him as a liaison, that to have the opportunity to engage with the rest of the Cascade board.
And then I will go ahead. Yeah, I agree with that. Actually, Councilmember Zahn, you're sideways, if just in case you want to know.
Oh,
your picture is sideways.
I'm sorry, my iPad stopped working, so I'm actually on my phone. Let me see.
Oh,
if
okay.
that.
There you go.
My
Okay, that's better. You know, I think the fact that I like the staff recommendation. I like, you know, having a reassessment in 2 years. I like that we would only be ponying up $300,000 at that point to join the proposed plan, and if there was showed to be a real need to do that, as opposed to right now starting to tax our ratepayers this increased rate and losing control of the reserves. And I do like the idea of getting feedback from other cities. And I'm sure Councilmember Stokes would like a little more time to process these new thoughts. And so I'd like to give him a week to do that and come back, and hopefully, you know, we can have done our homework over the week and be ready for a quick discussion and vote one way or another next week. So that's where I am. I don't feel ready to vote tonight, but I do agree with some of my colleagues, and I think most of us agree that we'd like to do a little bit of a hybrid. So that's where I am as well. So Councilmember Lee, I'm so hesitant to open this up again, but
just a question,
okay.
Point of order, I guess. You
All
know,
right.
I'm still learning the process in Cascade Water Alliance. Cascade Water Alliance board makes its own decisions. We don't make it for them.
Our representative, who
yes,
Councilmember Stokes, will carry our council vote forward.
We're just one vote. There are other members; they all can vote. You know, this is one way. I think one way to inform the other board member is through our decision on the council. That's it. We're not going to just because our vote, Cascade Water Alliance doesn't automatically do it.
Councilmember Lee, I'm going to ask
Bellevue,
Nav to give you the weight of our one vote.
So yeah, so two things. One, Councilmember Stokes, we would be happy to sit down with you, share everything that and give you a complete briefing and our thoughts. Please let us know how we can support you. On the second part, Councilmember Lee, our attorneys have looked at our contract with our interlocal with Cascade, and on this topic, there are two tests. One, and both are simple majority. One is every member gets one vote, and it's based on demand share, and and it has to meet both tests, otherwise the action doesn't move forward. So let's say that Bellevue said, no, we are not ready to establish a water supply fund, but let's wait 2 years to do that. Then that vote would have weight, and then Cascade could not establish a water supply fund. So Bellevue has that because of our demand share. We are 52.6% of the system. Our demand share is 52.6%. So we do have that according to our attorneys.
Okay, so I'm seeing a consensus to bring this back next week and to have staff available to answer any further questions, and to work with Councilmember Stokes to see if there's something, a hybrid that you could present next week. No, that kind of covers all that we've discussed. Do you feel like you've gotten enough feedback to do that? Okay.
Yes.
All right, Councilmember Stokes, you're our messenger when the vote comes up at Cascade Board on the 17th. Do you feel like you'll have enough time to be ready to take a vote at that time?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
All right. So we won't take a vote tonight, and that is the end. I'm really impressed that we got done before 10 o'clock tonight. Those were big study session items. So thank you for your all your timely comments and good discussion, and we'll see you next week. Meeting adjourned.